So are we close to ready? Well, Nathan's not here, so you have a little bit of a...
This meeting is being recorded.
Let me know when we're ready, okay? I'll go ahead and start without Nathan.
We are streaming and recording, Mayor, so you're good to start when you'd like.
All right. Thank you for coming, all of you that are here. I appreciate it. We have a good meeting, it looks like today, and for me, good means short. So I will try and make sure that we stay on track. We have Councilman Ball will give us our invocation, and then Council Member Rodella will lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay.
Father in heaven, we are grateful to be here as friends and neighbors to discuss the affairs of Highland. We are grateful to be in service and ask that thou might bless us, that we will be inspired to make decisions that are in accordance with the will of the people of Highland and also in their best interest. We ask that thy spirit may be with us, that we will be civil and have good, constructive discourse. We pray for and give thanks for in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
I'll stand. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I just wanted to share an observation that just occurred to me. We actually have two city recorders now. We have our official one here, and then we have our video recorder in the back. So Scott, you have a semi-official title. All right. Thank you for doing that, by the way, Scott. With that, we will go on to unscheduled public appearances. If there's anyone present or online that would like to share their thoughts with us for 3 minutes on any subject, we especially like those that say what a good job we're all doing, but we take the other ones as well. Is there anyone online?
There is no one online, Mayor.
Okay, so then we're doing a good job because no one's complaining. I'll go with that. All right, next item is we have a presentation scheduled for us with Rob Smith, and Amber, are you going to participate as well? So Rob Smith and Amber, and I'm having a senior moment, I forgot your last name. Our school board representative will apprise us of what's going on at the school district.
Awesome. I feel like I should stand like way back here so I can see everybody. So we're doing kind of the same thing at our meetings. You're spread out. So anyway, we're here from the school district to kind of just meet with you, let you know kind of where we're at, what page we're on. Oh, nice. Thank you. And how things are going with the school district right now, what's going on. We do meet with a lot of our cities regularly, and so I've been on the board about 1.5 years, just over, and this is my first time to get to come here, so we're happy to come more often. We're happy to have some breakfast meetings, you know, whatever you would like, we're happy to do that. So in the future, just drop us a line whenever you have some questions, and we're happy to come and talk to you. Like I said, my name's Amber Bonner. I am the rep for Cedar Hills, Alpine, and almost all of Highland. There's a couple of precincts on the southwest corner that vote for Sarah Beeson, who's the American Fork rep. But other than that, I have all of the rest of Highland. I live in Cedar Hills. I have 7 children. Let's see, what else do you want to know about me? I don't know. You'll have to email me if you want to know something more. So this first slide is, remind me which school, Vineyard? Vineyard Elementary, well, Vineyard Elementary is already built. We're building a new elementary school in Vineyard. This is what's happening there right now. We anticipate that school opening next fall. Vineyard is quite crowded right now, Vineyard Elementary, and so we're looking forward to splitting that population. Currently, we have several schools under construction. You may, as you've driven on SR 92, you may have seen that we have a school being built right there on the west side of the Micron property. There's an elementary school there now. We're building a junior high school there. So that will also open next fall. So that will alleviate some of the overcrowding we're dealing with at Skyridge High School, as well as the junior highs in the Lehigh area are also very large right now. So with me,
So can I interrupt? So you're stating that that junior high, you do not anticipate any Highland
No,
residents being affected by that new junior high?
no,
Okay.
we do not. Currently, Lehigh Junior only has the 7th and 8th graders because it does not have room for the 9th graders, so they are currently at Skyridge. What we anticipate happening when that junior high opens is those 9th graders will come back out of the high school into a junior high, and we'll probably see some boundary adjustments between Willow Creek and Lehigh Junior and the new junior high to kind of more evenly distribute the junior high population through Lehigh. So with me today, I have Dr. Elizabeth Wilson. She is the supervisor over our elementary schools in the north, so she covers all the elementary schools in this area. And also Rob Smith, who is our assistant superintendent over business services. So Rob loves to provide us with juicy spreadsheets.
I got a quick question. The older building there, was that a Vineyard School?
So that building is actually the building that's under construction.
No, I know there's one construction, but up on the,
Oh, the older building is, remind me what school that is? I think it's yeah, it's like, it's not there anymore. So it was Lincoln Elementary, and I think it was in Orem, correct?
all right, okay.
Yeah, it was in Orem. So, okay. Let's see. How do I do this? I'm not very technological. I may have to get Rob to do it for me. Am I doing it? Oh, okay, awesome. So, these are our board members. Let's see, so I'm gonna start on the left. Dr. Mark Clement is the board member over the Pleasant Grove area. He covers Pleasant Grove and Linden. He's a computer science professor at BYU. Sarah Hacken, the next one over in the green shirt, is, she covers the east side of Orem. She's a former history teacher in Alpine District. Sarah Beeson in the yellow, she has those couple of precincts in Highland I mentioned. She's covering the American Fork cluster. Scott Carlson in the gray suit in the middle is our board president. He covers the Lehigh area, and he's a civil engineer. His civil engineering expertise has been very helpful as we are doing a dang lot of building right now. Ada Wilson next is the board member over the west side of Orem, and then myself, and then Julie King, the last one, is over the Saratoga and Eagle Mountain area. So Julie has a really huge area. We're anticipating when the census goes through next year that we'll see some shifts in our board member boundaries. Let me see, we'll maybe go to one more to the next one. So as you can see, our district is very large. We go from Orem all the way out to Cedar Fort and Fairfield. So we cover 14 municipalities. Currently we have around 90 schools. We are building 4 schools right now that will be opening next year. That includes the junior high I mentioned, Vineyard Elementary, an elementary school in South Saratoga. Wait, is it only 3? Lehigh High School. And Lehigh High School is still under construction. We are doing a total rebuild of Lehigh High School while the students are still in school, so that's been quite the juggling act the principal there has been dealing with. But we anticipate all of those being finished next fall for Lehigh High, right? Lehigh's the next one, sorry, the one after that for Lehigh High 2022. Everything else will be ready next fall. So I'm going to turn the time over to Rob, unless you have any questions for me.
The one thing I hear from residents occasionally is complaints about Ridgeline Elementary overcrowding versus
Yep.
the one that's
So we are very aware of that
in
concern.
Alpine.
Westfield Elementary is technically in Alpine, but it shares a boundary with Ridgeline. Westfield has quite a bit of room. at Westfield. So I think we've been talking about that. Our board decided not to go out for a bond this fall, even though we had maybe anticipated doing so because of kind of the financial situation of the community and everything going on. But another reason was we want to look at what we can do to maximize the resources that we already have. So do we have schools that are under-enrolled? Do we have schools that need to be rebuilt that we maybe don't need to rebuild anymore because of the situation of the community? And I think as we go through that process this year, we'll be looking at a few boundary changes here and there to try to address some of those schools that maybe have too many students here and not enough students here. So I anticipate seeing some changes there relatively soon. So we'll see. We have a process that we go through when we do boundary changes where we go out to the community and talk to them and see what they think and what they want to do before we recommend a specific change. And then state law requires a 120-day window between when we tell people and when we can vote on that change. So I anticipate if there is a change suggested at Ridgeline, there will be quite a process that people will be involved in and be able to give their input. Any other questions for me? Okay, well, thanks. Rob?
Mayor, members of the council, always great to be here in Highland, where I used to be a resident. The mayor told me last time we visited that I could come back anytime.
Yes, repentance is always an option, right?
Anyway, and Kim, it's good to see you. Congratulations on your election. I hope Lance is doing well. I don't even know if you remember me. Let's talk sometime.
He's got a mask on, you can't tell.
And I do have a mask on, and I have facial hair. She would not recognize me because when I got to know her and her family, I was in a different assignment, and the stake president didn't allow facial hair. So, does that ring a bell? There you go. And, you know, I also have to say, Councilmember Bills is a dear friend. She interned with me up at the legislature, and anytime I can engage with her, she is a bright and an amazing woman, and the best intern I've ever had. So, wanted to state that publicly. And Nathan and I, we go way back as well. Our kids were in the AF marching band. Actually, Stephanie, we were talking about Ryan too. So I feel like I'm home with friends, and grateful to be here to share a few thoughts. My portion of this, I'm going to take the center portion of this presentation, and then Dr. Wilson is going to talk a little bit about our new Space Center and some specific enrollment numbers. And she's going to talk about Ridgeline. Ridgeline this October versus last October is actually down 22 students. And she'll talk a little bit about that. If you can forward that. One of the things in Alpine, it's a great benefit in our community, is we have two wonderful universities, Brigham Young University, Utah Valley University, and we have a steady stream of new teachers. This year we hired 534 new teachers. 256 at the elementary level, 127 at the junior high level, and 151 at the high school level. And people say, Rob, why does Alpine hire so many teachers? Well, one, we're growing, except for this year, because of COVID, and parents that have chosen to keep their kids home and homeschool and do other online options, et cetera. But we typically are growing about 1,000 to 1,200 students per year. But the interesting fact is 73% of our teachers are women. And as their spouses finish school, they get married, oftentimes they'll leave and move out of state, or stay home and raise a family. So with that demographic, you could see that we do have a steady turnover. So this is not atypical for Alpine. We've had as high as 700 new teachers in a given year. Again, this year, 534.
What's your turnover rate for teachers?
Excuse me?
What's your turnover rate for teachers?
About in the first year, we lose about 20% of our teachers. We have 3,600 teachers total. Many of those are one-year contracts, and so then we'll bring and rehire them next year. We do count that number in that turnover. But within the first 5 years, 35% of our teachers are in their first 5 years.
And then you retire some on the back end, right? Every
Correct.
year. So
Yep.
what's the, you know what the overall is?
Average teacher tenure?
No, just, you have 3,400 teachers, how many do you lose to retirement or?
Retirement about 60, depends on the year, 60, 80 teachers retire. The highest number is those that move and take another job with a spouse or stay home to raise a family. That's the biggest number. Great questions, Mayor, thank you. With this reality, I think most families, most parents, most students would say that the best predictor of success is a great teacher in a classroom. As teachers connect and facilitate with young minds and inspire them, motivate them, connect with them, support parents, that's when you're going to create great opportunities to learn. And so if you go to that next slide, the number one priority for our board is to recruit and retain the very best teachers that we can find. Whether that's compensation, whether that's benefits, whether that's culture, those are the things that we seek. And we are actively looking for the very best teachers we can find. This year, we did implement a retention incentive, something unique for Alpine School District in the state of Utah. We've looked at those turnover points, and we lose, again, a lot of our teachers in the first 5 years. So the school board said, here's a problem. Let's put a solution to try to address that problem. And so they created a retention incentive so that teachers, if they stay through their 5th year, we will deposit into their 401k $2,500. If they stay for 3 more years, that amount doubles. If they stay for 3 more years, then that amount doubles. And the hope is that those teachers will come and invest in our community, and we in turn will invest in them. The legislature passed the Teacher and Student Success Act, and that was the primary funding source for that retention incentive. Again, pretty, I think, unique and progressive way to retain teachers. So that's just one of the things, again, the board is doing to accomplish their number one priority. Any questions on that before I move on to some cluster concepts and how we make a large district stay small and get into our return to learn plans? Okay.
I'll ask some questions. Do you know how much, you mentioned that you use COVID funds for this retention program, correct?
No. We use Teacher and Student Success Act funds, state appropriated state resources, not federal resources.
So are you going to go through any funding that you received on COVID?
I can.
Do you know how much money the district received on COVID?
$6.1 million for the first round of CARES Act. We have 2 grants that just were released by the State Board of Education, $1.6 million for coronavirus relief. We are just finishing our application for that grant and an additional $262,000 for personal protective equipment.
So what's your anticipation to use for the 6.1? I think it was $6,181,097.73.
Sounds about right.
What's your plan for that money?
The fundamental use of that money is for PPE and for salary and benefits for employees to make sure that we keep people employed. Part of that also is the FFCR requirements. I don't know if Highland City has experienced some of the leave requirements for your employees. The CARES Act money is available to be used to pay for that leave for those people who don't currently have leave. So that's what we're using it for. Great questions, thank you. Okay, next slide for me. Large district, about 81,000 students. We try to keep it small by breaking into clusters. Our board member Bonner, and I just have to say, she works tirelessly. I'll send her a spreadsheet. She'll say on line L, what does this dollar amount mean? Our board, just like you council members, go through a lot of material, and they do that because they care very much about their stewardship. They work tirelessly. I think, trying to think of the meetings in the last week, she's probably been in meetings 30 plus hours, and I don't see, other than the texts and the emails I get from her late at night, early in the morning, I don't see the other conversations she's having serving you. But our board members do a phenomenal job. And we break our district into clusters. So you have primarily one board member in each cluster. Again, Julie King has the 2 clusters, and Sarah Hacken has a portion of 2 clusters in Orem. But we do that to try to keep feeder concepts, because what's in Lone Peak cluster, which is Highland City, what happens here and the needs here might be a little different than what is down in the Mountain View cluster. And that's one of the ways we've tried to keep a large district small, by breaking it into smaller pieces. The next slide just goes into our Return to Learn plan. I sent this to our city managers as we approved it. I know Nathan received that and others. This is our first pandemic, and we're learning, and we've learned a lot. And this has changed. If slide 3, as I come through, we continue to get updates. An update even just this last week on quarantine periods was reduced from 14 days to 7 days with a negative test, and we can get kids back into school. But this is something that's fluid as we continue to use data, and one of the things that we were doing is keeping data on the students that were quarantined. We had over 5,000 students at the secondary level that were quarantined, and only 38 were positive. That positive rate was extremely low. We used that as a piece to inform decision makers to make adjustments to the quarantine, again, so we can get kids back into school. On our website, you can click on that. You can see this entire plan. The next 2 slides just show the elementary plan and the secondary plan. We had really every option for parents. Face-to-face, a hybrid or online option, or a district supported with our Alpine Online or our East Shore Online option for those students as well, and anything in between. These are the elementary options. Again, if you have any details or questions or comments, our plan was pretty comprehensive and really gave parents choices that best met their students' and families' needs. At the same time, trying to safeguard our teachers and our students. Next slide is just the secondary options. Very similar layout, a couple of minor tweaks. I won't go into those details unless you have questions.
I do.
Shoot.
So I live not too far from Lone Peak and jog on the trail behind Lone Peak High School. And since the start of the school year, the parking lot has dropped to maybe a quarter people being there. And is everyone just turning or deciding to learn it online, or how is that going? Because, as I've talked to people, by and large, they don't think kids learn anything by learning at home. I mean, some do, they're motivated, but I just was curious, have you had a major outbreak at Lone Peak? I'm not aware of it, I'm a local physician, but there's like nobody parked there now, so I just wonder what's going on, do you know? Maybe
Yeah.
you know better, I don't know.
And I can address it if I don't hit it. Our board member Bonner can hit it as well. I know she and I presented, Scott Sumner, the principal at Lone Peak, presented with us at Cedar Hills a couple weeks ago, and he talked about that very issue. Lone Peak was one of our schools that went to a modified or a hybrid schedule. We've changed our entire secondary to a new modified schedule to try to address some of the issues. But at one time, Lone Peak, I want to say, had 300 students on quarantine or somewhere about. So one of the issues is there were fewer students there just because there were so many that were quarantined.
But that's the 2-week quarantine, right?
Correct. We've had some students that have been quarantined twice because of possible exposure. So I think there's a variety of reasons. We've had parents choose to keep students home and have their teachers work with them online. That's another reason why you'll see fewer cars there at the school. But those would be the 2 or 3 things I would share.
The big thing, I think, that first of all I'd want to emphasize is all of our board members, and I think all of our administrators, feel very strongly about kids being in school. I think the data from the spring and the data that we're seeing now in our schools is very clear that students learn best from a teacher. They don't learn best online. And that's not true for every student, obviously. I mean, some students do very well with online learning, and that's something their parents should decide for them. But in general, our kids are learning with a caring teacher in person. And so it's a real priority for our board to keep kids in school. The state came out with a manual over the summer that outlined guidelines and requirements for schools to be open. One of those guidelines was that if a school hits 15 students that are positive, 15 members of the school community, so teachers, students, people in the building, that tested positive, that the school would be moved to full online school. In our discussions since with the Utah County Health Department, they have told us that that 15 number, instead of automatically moving a school to online, instead that 15 number would spark a conversation between the county health department, the state health department, us, sometimes even our city people, just kind of depending on who they feel they need to bring in. And then they would decide what needs to happen at the school. So my concern with that 15 number has been that it's a flat number regardless of the size of the school. And Lone Peak currently has about 2,500 students, and 15 students is less than 1% of the student body, especially when you add in faculty. I think that puts us up to about 2,750. So I feel like maybe at a 600 student elementary school, 15 is a pretty decent sized number, but at a high school where you've got 2,700 people that you're counting, I'm not sure that that 15 number is a really good number. And that's what the county health department also decided. So when Lone Peak did hit 15, and that conversation was held, and what happened was the county health department recommended that we move the school to a hybrid schedule where only half of the students were in the building at a time. So I have 2 students at Lone Peak myself, and we're a B, so we were in the first group. So my boys went to school Monday, Tuesday, and then the second half of the alphabet came Wednesday, Thursday, and then we went Friday and Monday, and the next, and so we did that for a couple of weeks. And it ended up that the kids ended up, the 2 halves of the alphabet ended up with the same amount of time in school. And teachers were providing things at home for the students at home to do. Like I said earlier, I don't think that that's the best situation for our students. They need to be in school. So in talks with the county health department for second term, which actually starts Thursday for our secondary schools, our elementary students are already back in school after the break. We're going with a schedule that will put the kids in school 4 days a week with a day off on Wednesday. And well, we don't like that day off thing because it's not really a day off. They're going to be online learning from home, finishing work, doing projects, taking a test, being remediation if that's needed, those types of options. But we want our teachers who have been just drowning between online students, quarantine students, in-person students, all the things going on, we want them to have a little bit more time to be able to reach those students that are in quarantine or at home for various reasons and meet their needs. So between that and the change that that has been approved in the quarantine schedule, we feel like this schedule is going to get kids in school more often this term.
Well, I certainly hope to, because I'm a local physician, and I've had probably 50 patients with COVID-19, and I really don't know of a young person who's had it that was really sick. Mm-hmm. So the only thing you're protecting, I think, is your senior staff.
Correct. To
be honest, because most of the kids are asymptomatic or they have cold-like symptoms or maybe a mild flu. Mm-hmm. But I am concerned that kids aren't learning. And the problem is we have lots of parents that both work. So right. You've got your teenagers home without any supervision. They need to be in school. And I think there's been a lot of hysteria about this virus. I'm not impressed that people are really sick with it now. I've had some really sick people in the hospital early on, but I think it's mutated. That's my personal opinion, what I've seen from the literature and stuff. Mm-hmm. So I think we need to get the kids back in school. I think we need to protect the teachers, especially ones that have other health problems. But I just don't think the kids are learning. And right. I know from my own daughter who has kids that they've been out of school more than they've been in it because they keep getting quarantined and they have been sick.
And that was why we talked to the state about that.
Yeah.
The quarantine, the 14-day quarantine is, in my opinion, according to the data that we now have from the start of school until now, 14-day quarantine is excessive. Students do not need to be out that long. Doing a 7-day quarantine and then they can go get tested, come back with a negative test, that should catch 90%, according to the health department, of cases that are going to be positive. As long as they're asymptomatic, they should be in school. So we need kids in school. And like I said, I have 2 students at Lone Peak, and I see that same thing. So that schedule change that we have suggested that we're going to be doing for second term is only for secondary schools. It's not for our elementary schools, partially because, first of all, we're not seeing any cases in our elementary schools. In general, they might have 0 or 1. I would say the majority of our elementaries have no cases right now. So we didn't see a need to disrupt that schedule further than it already has been. Plus, those students need more parental assistance at home, and that might be problematic for those families that have 2 wage earners in their home. So I think our board's goal and our administrative goal, I talked about this with the superintendent this morning, is to have kids in school. We need kids in school.
I agree 100%.
So that's what we're working towards.
So Amber, a concern, I have a high schooler also. You know, we look at how the county has come out. We see everyone here in our meeting wearing masks. What's kind of the board's point of view on the kids at school wearing masks? And with the new mask mandate, if you want to say that the county or the state's kind of moved into that if we're in a group, you know, they're supposed to keep it on. And I keep hearing, you know, conflicts that sometimes at the high school the kids aren't wearing them. They are. I recognize maybe they don't have the health concern, but there's the concern they could bring something home. What's the school's plan with what this new, you know, state program is about masks?
I think that when you look at the data that we're seeing at the schools, that the masks are working at our schools. I mean, we do have kids who have tested positive and they were in school, and then kids who sat near them are quarantined, and those quarantined kids are not getting sick. So it seems to me like it's working. I mean, we've had, like Rob said, I think it's way over 5,000 students at this point that have been quarantined because of a close exposure to a positive student, and they aren't getting sick. Less than 40 of them have gotten sick. So I think it's working. When I talk to principals and teachers at school, the students are doing very, very well with their masks. It seems that it's just become what they wear now. The majority of our students don't seem to be having difficulty. We are allowing students who have a medical necessity to fill out a form and not need to wear a mask. There is a little bit of forgetfulness at the high school level, and I have seen that when I've been in the school. There are kids, you know, who pull it down and forget to put it back up or whatever, and they've been gently reminded by teachers and administrators, and I think in general that's going well. It's not perfect, which I think will probably never be with kids, but it's going well. And when I talk to our administrators, it's just not a big deal. Like, the kids are wearing them and it hasn't been a problem for them. So I think it's likely.
56, 58, 36.
Okay, so we have had 5,658 kids quarantined because they sat by or were with someone who was positive, and 36 of them ended up testing positive. So to me, that's saying the mask thing is working, and let's keep doing that if that's what we've got to do to have kids in school as much as possible and still protect our more vulnerable people, either at school or at home with that student. So does that answer your question? Does that help? Okay, any other questions? Okay, sorry for the jump in. I'll let Rob.
That's great. I told you our board members are awesome, didn't I? Yeah. We jump to the next slide. This is just the COVID tracker. If you wanted to look at the schools in Highland, on our main page, the main slider, you click on that middle button and you can look at every school. One of the things that we balance is student privacy versus information that is actionable for parents or teachers or community. And so we think this has really done a good job in balancing both of those needs. And so again, this is just a screenshot as of that day. The numbers are very different today if I was to pull it up, but that's available for you and for our parents to see what's going on at the schools.
And I just get an A+ for that, for my book, because that addressed a lot of the things I've heard from parents. And it's a lot of work to put that together once, but to maintain it is somebody's doing a lot of work behind the scenes to make that work well. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. And again, great feedback from parents saying, hey, we need this, and we responded. I'm now going to turn some time over to Dr. Wilson. She's going to talk about a couple of school-specific and get into some enrollment data for Highland schools, and then I'll jump back and finish up.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here. I am a Highland resident for the last 15 years. I raised my family here, so I love Highland dearly. Okay, if you'll switch to the next slide. This is the Space Center, and if you want to back it out, you can see some of the statistics. I won't read those to you. I will just highlight some of it. But this is a great resource that is in our community. This is in Central Elementary that this Space Center is housed. It originally started in 1990. So 21 years later, we now have a new Space Center through gracious donations and a lot of hard work. It now has 6 simulators. You can see that to accommodate 120 students. So I don't know if any of you or your family members have had the opportunity to do the Space Center, but that is a great treat, and a lot of great opportunities that happened there. My own daughter, my own children have been there. They had birthday parties and great things that happened there. The artist who has created the Hanging in the Planets is Randy Reuter, and he's a nationally recognized artist, graphic artist. So that really is a treat that's available to the patrons in the community and to our own students.
So who's it available? Any resident within the school district or just students?
It's going to be predominantly students, but yes, it will be open to other people. In fact, I think other districts will be able to attend also on availability. Anything else you want to add to that, Rob? Nope. Okay. No, and there were a lot of donations that helped make this possible, so it wasn't just the district money.
So Mayor, what you're thinking is we could go as a council or as things, and we could have a commander, a navigator, an engineer, and we could go and have a simulation.
It is. If you have not experienced it, it is a real treat. So if you want to, let us know and we'll see what we can do to get you in. Yeah, no, that is great.
Definitely a work session.
Yeah. No, it really, really is a treat if you have not experienced it. Okay, if you'll forward to the next slide, please. Okay, here are some numbers that are specific for your interests. This is school enrollment trends as of October 1st compared to last year to October 1st compared this year. And these are hard numbers. So if you look at Freedom Elementary, that next column is the total number of students, again, October 1st of last year to October 1st of this year. You can see the previous year and then the change. So Freedom Elementary is down 89 students. Highland Elementary, you can see the years, they are down 49 students. Ridgeline Elementary is down 22 students. Mountain Ridge Junior High is down 34 students. And Lone Peak High School is up 23 students. So that is the only school in this area that has actually grown.
So is that the case for most schools because of COVID, or would this be similar without COVID?
I think that is fairly similar. This is kind of in a declining area. Some areas like out west, those numbers would be very different. And there is some construction, obviously, you know, that is happening. So these numbers might look different again in another year when you take a look at those construction numbers.
So is Westfield also going down?
Westfield is down. They do have some growth, but yes, they are down.
Okay.
And we are looking at some boundary readjustments there between Westfield and Ridgeline.
So how is this affected by people homeschooling? Because Ridgeline Elementary is in a high growth area in Highland, so I'm kind of surprised that you had it drop by 22 students.
They are. And I supervise the elementary schools in the north, so there are 12 elementary schools that are in there. There is, I would say, about 90%, if not a little more, of the area, the schools in the north have in-person learning. The school that has the highest out or online learning is Belmont. And they have a little more, like I'd say maybe 12% of their students are online learning. But most of the schools in this area have in-person learning. So that could be a piece of it.
It's too early, but do you have any sense if there's going to be an increase in the number of people that homeschooled? So maybe, I don't know what it is, 2%, 3%, just guessing, but will that go up a little bit because people try it and like it?
We are actually seeing, in fact, I just talked with a parent today who was interested in her daughter coming back to in-person learning as soon as possible. So some families that wanted to try the online learning are finding that it's not best for them, or that the COVID is not the risk that they anticipated that it would be, and that they are returning to in-person learning. So these numbers might look different now, or might look different a little bit later. This is again an October 1st count.
And when they do that, do you do the transition back at a break, or do they just?
When we put out our return to learn plan, we said that we would like a commitment from that point until the trimester for elementary, or the quarter, just because it's easier to transition, but recognizing that there are always needs. So we say work with the principal, and yes, we would like them to return if they want to as soon as possible, to get them into those classrooms learning in the best environment for them. Are there any other questions about elementary or anything else that I can answer for you? So far, it's been very successful. We've been able to have very low COVID numbers in the elementary school, and our teachers have been able to really manage both the online and in-person learning. We've had some good success there. Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's go back to the next slide. A couple of things that we just wanted to draw your attention. Some of your tax dollars being spent right here in your schools. Mount Ridge Junior High School just had several major improvements: tennis courts, some security enhancements, recarpeting, and a roof project. Lone Peak had a playing field project. We appreciate working with the city on acquiring some additional property on that west side to alleviate some parking issues as well. We put some parking in there. We also have redone the turf field for the soccer stadium. We redid the roof, and a lot of people don't know Lone Peak's 25 years old, and people still think it's a brand new school. And we have great students, we have great community, we have great custodians that really do a great job taking care of their asset, which is your asset. But it takes about $5 million to redo the roof of a high school. We put on a single ply membrane, and it has about a 20-year life. So we were actually able to stretch that just a little bit farther, but we did re-roof that facility this past year. In the future, we'll continue to doing ongoing renovations and improvements, whether that's parking enhancements or a variety of different projects at our schools here in Highland. I just want to, yeah. Oh, thank you, Amber. Any of you have students at Highland Elementary? We also redid the main entrance in the office area to provide a secure and safe entrance at Highland Elementary. That design, the office was actually set back in the school, and so that was a significant improvement both for customer service but also for security of students and families. So thank you, Amber, for sharing that one. Next slide. I did bring some things that people don't want to look at a 200-page CAFR or a 200-page budget document. But they might look at something that's like a bookmark with cliff notes. So I brought some copies I'll give to your recorder, but this just highlights some quick facts about the business operation. We have a similar document we're preparing for the educational operation that'll talk about graduation rates and success rates for students and ACT passage rates and so forth and so on. But this is just a couple of things. I talked about the retention incentive on that top right. Dr. Wilson talked about donations for our Space Center. We received private contributions in excess of $3 million to help invest in that planetarium and those simulators. We're grateful very much for the donors that did that. We've got our bond rating there, AAA. How we use our trust land funds, school community councils that work so hard to invest in our teachers and students for their success. But just a couple of quick facts. I'll again leave these with your staff, and they can share this with the council. We also brought just one of the things that we strive very hard to work on is working together as one community with one purpose. We'll leave a little sticker. Sometimes people have water bottles. I know Board Member Bonner, her daughter really loves water bottles and stickers. And so we had some stickers made to get out the message that we are one community and we have a responsibility to each other and we need to look out for each other. And we're grateful to be part of that with you. The next slide, I just wanted to say thanks to Mayor Mann. I've loved working with him on a variety of projects over the years. We reached out on some city CARES Act money to invest in some touchless drinking fountains. Just want to say thank you for taking the lead, talking with your colleagues, talking with the council. Appreciate it very much. Those have been installed. And again, another support, cities and schools working to serve the same people. So I just wanted to say thank you on a personal note for that. And then finally, just what can we do to support you? What are some other issues that we're not aware of that we can do better at so we can better serve and support families here in Highland? And that's kind of what we wanted to close with.
Thank you. Thank all of you. Excellent information. Any other questions, Council?
I have a question. First off, thank you for everything that you do. And as a teacher, Kurt, I can say that the mask wearing is mostly good. There are a couple of kids every day who struggle, but overall, I think it goes well. The question that I get asked the most, Rob, is do you think there will ever become a point where, I know that with economies of scale, but where we kind of tip and where you think that a district split would be necessary? Do you see a point that that happens? And if you do, what do you think the driving force would be for that? Do you think that would be something that would be city-led or resident-led or district-led, or how do you think that would go?
Yeah, thanks for the hard questions. Did I say she was a good intern? She asks hard questions.
You could amend that.
Yeah. Yes, actually I had 2 conversations, one with a board member today on that very topic. Do I think that that topic needs further public discussion? The answer is yes. Do I think you'll see a timeline that item will be discussed? I think the answer to that is also yes. Your question about what specific factors would lead to that, I would just note 3. Number 1, I think if there was a decline in student academic performance, I think that's a cause to say maybe we need to do something different. Number 2, I think if there is a concern with the use of tax dollars. I understand what fiduciary means, and I take that very seriously. But if there are concerns about things like that, I think that would be time to pause and say, should we consider or look at that? Third, I would say if there is a lack of communication or engagement with the public that we serve, then I think there's a time to say, should that be a question that we dig into? So that would be my response. I do think the best way to do that is for the school board, who has a stewardship for children, for the board to say, it's time to talk about this, and here's how this can be done in an effective, efficient manner, and hopefully avoid some of the challenges we saw up north from the situation of Jordan School District splitting into 2.
And if you look at that previous slide you had, I mean, administrative costs, like at the district level, are certainly super low, so there's, advantages I see.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Hey, Rob, I have a question. I know you mentioned a decline in student academic standards. Have you guys been measuring that? Have you seen a decline with the decreased hours, decreased days, kids in quarantine? How is that being measured, and have you seen any decrease in those academic standards as of now?
Yeah, great question. I would think we're a little early, but anecdotally, I would say yes, we have gaps. We have gaps from last year, from the dismissal. My teachers that I've talked to and asked that question, some say yes, we have identified some, and we are working hard to close those gaps. And again, I think you saw the secondary way of addressing maybe more face-to-face, eliminate some of the quarantine. I think those are attempts to say we recognize we have work to do and we're trying to respond and intervene to address some of those issues. But from my lens, reports that I've seen, other than talking with teachers, I have not seen hard data other than one data point, and that was our beginning year reading scores, our Acadian scores. This year started out much lower. And again, I think some of that has to do with the dismissal from last year. There was a hard stop, and the activity and engagement, despite efforts to outreach and so forth, just did not translate into continued learning and performance. Anything to add to that?
And I'll just speak to that from an elementary point of view. Last year, we did not have end-of-year state testing because of the dismissal. And so part of the district response to that, at least as far as at the elementary level, and I know secondary is working on that too, we have what we call our elementary success criteria. And so those are internally developed tests that have been developed by teachers and by the curriculum department. And so they're given at the beginning of the year, and the middle of the year, and the end of year, so that we have our own success criteria so that we're not, we don't have to depend on end of year testing to determine how our students are doing. And so they're all benchmarked and developed, and they're really rigorous tests. And so we actually gave some benchmark tests at the beginning of the year on last year's core standards. And so then we'll also give those again at the end of the year. So yes, we did see a little bit of a decline just because obviously the rigor is not there when you're testing and teaching online. It's just not going to be the same as in person. But we've got some really committed teachers, and we believe that those are not going to be long-term losses, that those can all be made up and addressed.
Anything else? All right, well, thank you very, very much, Rob and Amber.
I just want to make a quick comment, really quick, now that Rob's done. We have probably the best business services team in the state, hands down. There is no question that Rob is leading an absolutely outstanding team for us. And I think I just want to throw out a thank you to our administrative staff. Our teachers are working so hard, so many hours right now, but our administrators are working just as hard, and the academic success of our students is at the forefront of everything they do, and I'm really grateful for that. Dr. Wilson and I have had several discussions about what we can do to help teachers and move forward, and Rob's been very, very good at looking at those things also. So I just want to say thank you to them. Also, I thought I would tell you I was at Lone Peak last week for a meeting, and Lone Peak has a 96.7% graduation rate for last year, which is the highest we've ever had. So if you know how graduation rates work, a lot of our special ed students stay with us until they're 21, and so the way the state counts graduation rates, they count against us for graduation, so we'll never reach 100. So 96.7 is probably one of the it has to be one of the highest in the state. Anyway, so we have some really, really great things happening in our schools, and that's because we have some great administrators and some great teachers and really great community members and parents. So thank you. And reach out anytime if there's anything I can do to help, or if you need a work session at the planetarium when it gets open.
And I just want to say again, thank you, Amber. I know you put in a ton of hours, and Rob, you and Ron should get together, because Rod, your spreadsheet magic, it's amazing what you two can do with a spreadsheet. I think one of the lessons that we'll all learn from this is like what level of government should be making decisions and how, because I think it's been so interesting how you guys have had to plan everything around what the health department is doing and what the state Department of Education is doing and what the governor is mandating. And I think that when this is all done, which Scott tells me is soon.
It's soon.
Soon. It'll be one of the things we have to revisit is who should be making these decisions and how, because it's crazy.
Thank you. All right. We're moving on to consent items. and we have 4 of them on the table. I think, item A, approval of meeting minutes. Item B, final plat approval, Spruce's subdivision plat B. C, purchase contract with Wheeler Machinery for a backhoe. And item D, library board bylaws. Does anyone want to pull any of these?
Mayor,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion.
Sure.
I approve the Highland City Council I move that the Highland City Council approve the consent items 3A, B, C, and D.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
A motion by Scott, second by Kim. Are we ready to vote electronically? We are. Okay, everybody's voted. That passes unanimously. Thank you, council. Next item is interlocal agreement with American Fork, Cedar Hills, and Pleasant Grove regarding a ditch. I assume that's you, Todd?
Mayor, Council, the purpose of this agenda item is, for several years, we've been looking at different projects at the mouth of the canyon. One of the projects that Pleasant Grove has moved forward with is piping what they call the mill ditch. It runs along the south side of the golf course. It's on Cedar Hills and Highland property, but it's basically the Pleasant Grove irrigation ditch that provides irrigation water to us, Cedar Hills, and Pleasant Grove. They have funding to pipe the ditch, but this is the agreement that basically allows them to get on our property and pipe the ditch and reconstruct our turnout for the Pleasant Grove irrigation water that we receive. In the report, I provided the plans. If you have any questions, I provided the full agreement. I didn't want to bore everyone with that, but as you can see there, it's the highlighted area right south of the golf course that you can see on your plan. Does the council have any questions about this?
I have one little quick question. I don't have any problem with this, but do we get the water for the Highland Glen Park or for the pond from the Pleasant Grove irrigation, as I understand? Is that correct?
It is. So if you look at the plan there, we have a turnout at the very southwest end of this project. Yeah, right down in there. Keep going south, right in there. So there is a turnout that we take the water there. That's how we receive all of our Pleasant Grove irrigation water. And it actually goes down a ditch. It goes to several users along there. And then it ultimately makes it into the Highland Glen Pond.
So the piping project won't affect this?
No,
Okay.
it will. The water will go down the new piping project and we will have a new turnout, but it actually will modify it and make it better moving forward.
So they'll lose less water, and it's safer as well.
Correct.
And none of that comes out of our budget. Now, AF is doing some improvements as well.
Yeah, so if you look in the agreement, AF has a water line, a culinary water line that runs a little bit more through the center of the current golf course. They would like to replace that pipe, so they're actually going to, in conjunction with the irrigation ditch being piped, they're going to put a new pipe next to it, virtually in the same trench, and pipe that while we have the irrigation ditch torn up. So if you remember, about a year and a half ago, American Fork rebuilt their chlorination station and moved it down by their tanks. So this new water line will connect in there. So
I'll make a motion.
Okay, awesome.
Thanks. I move that the City Council approve and authorize the city administrator to execute the agreement for the piping of the mill ditch.
I'll second it.
Motion by Kim, second by Scott.
I would like to point out your names are all normal this week.
Dang. That was so fun last week. I should have paid you more, Aaron.
Oh, wait.
And Timothy is absent, so that passes unanimously with one abstention. All right, next item. Ground lease agreement extension, American Towers. Nathan, is that you? Or is that Tyler?
Oh, that's me, thank you. Okay, just some background for you. The property is located just west of Myers and Toscana. Originally owned by the Highland Water Company in 1999, the council issued a conditional use permit, and the water company also did an extension for this lease in 2001. American Tower is requesting a extension for the existing ground lease. There's currently 9 years on the existing lease left. It was in fall of 2019 when the council first considered this. They continued it to try to get some additional information on cost and the value of the lease. Since that time, I've been informed by American Tower that they've lost two of the carriers on that tower, and they have one carrier remaining. According to them, the existing carrier on there would like to continue on the tower. However, they're looking for a long-term commitment, which is why we are here today. So you can see the property before you. The stars are the location of the two towers. One of the things about this property, it's encumbered by a number of existing easements, whether they're power, water, and so forth. The possibility for future redevelopment as it relates to the city goes is very limited. You can see the on the left, the little green building, that is a well site. We tried a number of different things. We actually looked at this for storage of some outdoor equipment and things like that, even park maintenance things, and we couldn't fit anything, if I remember right, Todd, on this one to make it work. So really, as value in the future has limited value. I will note on the map that you have, it shows a building which was the former water company building. That parcel there has been sold to WPI for future commercial development.
So is this tower the north? This is the north tower, right?
I believe it's south one.
The south tower has a building actually on it, right?
Excuse me?
So your north tower, just so when I looked at all three, there's two towers there. Each tower has 3 users on it currently.
3 arrays.
Well, they have 3 users because they have all their stuff still on it. They haven't taken it off.
Right.
As we look, so we have a north tower which has more of a fencing, and then we have a south tower that has like a building on it. Which tower are we discussing? Do you know?
I believe it's the south one.
Do we know who the current user is on that tower?
No, we do not.
Have we asked?
I have not, but they didn't volunteer it.
Yeah, of course they did.
Does it matter? Yes. Why?
Depending on who the user is, they will pay lease rates anywhere. If it is one of the major carriers, your lease rate's much higher than if it's a minor radio station broadcast, meaning it's the radio wave broadcast. So it depends on the type of use of the user.
Okay, so they have presented 3 options for the council to consider. You can see 2019, there was 2 options. One was perpetual easement. Obviously, that's a typical offer no matter who the company is. You can see the offer between 2019 and 2020. And then option 2, 6 additional 5-year terms, one-time payment of $75,000, a monthly rent of increase of $925, that's up from $674, and keep the current revenue share. I will mention that the revenue increase would be a 4% annual escalation.
Nathan, can you share, it says current revenue share, is that stating that, are they sharing with us what they're getting as revenue, and we're getting a certain percentage of the revenue they're generating off the cell
Correct.
tower? What's
Correct.
the percentage? Do you know the percentage?
I don't remember off the top of my head, but it does equal $200. I'll look it up in the contract.
I'm
We
just saying,
have
so
it
if
right
they,
here.
I guess the question is, so if they do add other users, because right now you said they have 2 users that did not renew their lease. If they do get other users, then our revenue could be higher than $200 a month. Is that correct?
It's, let me finish this and I'll look that specific provision up for you. Option 3 in 2019, there wasn't a provided one. You can see the provision for the third one, which is again the 30-year lease, one-time $15,000 with a 70187 with the annual 4% escalation.
So I'm assuming that is the original, that mirrors the original agreement, the monthly rent. Is that correct?
I don't know, Mayor, sorry. So the finance director did run a financial analysis over the 3 options. Option 2 provides the best long-term financial value for the city in that it would result in about $748,000 in cash and a net present value of just over $353,000. So if the council chooses to extend the lease option, we recommend option 2 on that. So let me look up that provision for you real quick on the revenue sharing.
I think, Kurt, I just looking at the original agreement, I think the bottom one represents what the original agreement would have been roughly. Because in 2000 it was 616 with a 4% increase.
I mean, I think as a council, we need to be aware that it appears we have 2 leases here. We have one with American Tower and one with Crown Castle. Crown Castle appears to be paying us $2,000 a year, and this offer from American Tower on this other cell tower is for $925 a month. So I mean, there is $1,000 difference per month between the towers. And I agree, depending on the users, how the rate. And that's why I was wondering who the users were.
American Tower annual value is about $10,822, and Crown Castle is about $23,777 based on what we're receiving. I did go through the minutes. The Crown Castle was renewed in 2011 based on the agreement, and I did go through minutes. I didn't see a specific discussion on that item, so I don't know the differences or why.
So but did you notice if they had that one-time, did they have a one-time payment on the renewal?
They did. That was an option, but that one wasn't signed.
Okay, so we just took an annual amount that was higher. So if you factor in the $75,000 lump sum payment, how does that impact the annual?
Are you referring to the three options,
Right,
your
'cause
mayor,
you
or are you
just-
referring to Crown Castle?
I'm referring to our current offer, the option 2.
Yes.
And you said it's 10,000 X a year. Did that include the 75K bonus one-time payment?
Tyler, you want to talk about that?
While he's coming up here, where it says that this offer expires within 30 days, we don't need to worry about that, of August 3rd?
Yes, I did have a conversation with American Tower, and they stated that that offer is still valid.
And Mayor, your question was regarding the $75,000 on option 3.
Right, because we said the annual contract value was.
So current annual revenue is 10, sorry,
annual revenue, but if you
10,822.
factored in the 75K, what does that make it?
You're looking for the net present value of that over the term?
Including the 75K, right?
Yes, so our calculations did factor that in, yes.
So his question is, based on the 75, what's our total annual revenue we are projecting? The one in the report is.
You have to take 5
our
times 6
current
years, so
revenue.
you have 30 years divided by 75 is what you're saying, right?
So that's roughly another 2K-ish.
Yeah, I mean, it would be 2250 a year, but I'm just, so let me ask you, Tyler, you have down here, it says current revenue share revenue of 200. How did you figure that at this time we're currently getting $200 in revenue share?
My understanding is that was information we received from
American Tower.
American Tower.
So my question is, once again, are they sharing what the revenue, I mean, are they giving us the number that they have as revenue on this tower, and then we're getting a percentage of that revenue? What's this revenue share?
The question to American Tower was, we were looking at trying to match our accounting system with the revenue that we got. And we had some numbers that didn't make sense. And so the email to American Towers was, what percentage of revenue, what's the revenue share that you send to Highland City? And they said $200. Did I ask, hey, how much revenue do you get and what do we get? No, we did not ask that.
Because I don't see anything in the agreement that talks about a revenue share. That's what I'm trying, when this is being presented, I'm going, well, if it says, hey, if we produce 100,000 in income, we're going to give you 4% of that. Now, I understand there's a 4% escalator, but even if they said 5%, I just don't know where the revenue shares, how we are supposed to, how do we back in the numbers?
Right, great question. I haven't seen, like you, Councilman, I haven't seen the provisions there within the agreement. So right now, what we're relying on is the statement there from American Towers of that $200 coming to the city.
So I've got a couple questions when Kurt's finished there.
Go ahead, Scott.
Okay, I was just a little perplexed because the three offers seem so different. And I was just wondering if this company has lost 2 of the 3 users, is the same termination clause in the old agreement going to go forward? Because it seems to me like if you take one of the cheaper options, even though long-term, it pays well, but if they lose that third person and terminate the agreement, it would seem almost more logical to take the one they give you the most money right now. I don't know. Do we know if the third user is pretty stable? We don't know anything about the third user, do we? So I guess my concern is there a chance they could terminate this after 5 years and say then, have you taken that into consideration? Is this a dumb question? I don't know.
So Scott, my understanding, and I've owned a cell tower, they're not going away. The salespeople will try, we might not renew. They're trying to say, hey, we've got some users that didn't renew. Go look at the tower. There's 3 users per each tower. At least they've kept all everything.
But they lost 2 of the users.
Or they have not renewed at this time. They're losing if they don't get it renewed. They'd rather be on a tower that's confirmed what they're doing. I mean, I think they're in the business to add users. It's how they make money.
Right.
And so I can tell you they've had 3 on each of our towers. I would assume our towers, because they have fiber ran to them, they're already existing, they've already been permitted. We are the least path to resistance at this time. To go and find a new tower, to move a tower, it won't be easy for them. I mean, these towers don't cost, they cost probably more than $200,000 to go install. I mean, these are not cheap towers. And I'm not trying to use, but
It's hard to find locations, because when I was on the council before, they tried to put a cell tower in another section of the city, and I'll tell you, that was impossible.
oh no, that's, so I mean, I think we have a willing leaser, if you want to say that they're interested, they're willing, they're trying to come negotiate. My feeling is, I'm going, okay, if they only have 1 user and they're willing to pay this, maybe part of the things is each user, you add $500 per month. That gets us closer that if they get up to 3 users, that's what we're getting from Crown Castle at this time. We don't know the user. If we knew that this user was one of the major carriers out there, the rent at the 925 is pretty low, just even for 1 user. I mean, you have to, but it appears that they have space on the tower. They've built the tower to be able to have 3 users.
Kurt, to answer your question about revenue sharing, it's on page, darn it. If you look at the last agreement, I mean the original agreement.
You're talking about the one with Nextel West Corp, right?
Yeah, there's a letter dated July 21st, 2000.
Okay.
Attention Highland Water Company, attention Mark Thompson. It says Highland Water Company is to receive an additional $200 per month for revenue received from subletting to others within the leased premises. So it sounds like they had a original user, and to put additional arrays on it, that would be my assumption.
They might have, yes, that's one
It's a
thing.
fixed amount.
Yeah, we just need to make sure if they come ask for more space. So what's been my experience is they'll come and they'll have a certain number of space. They need to add generators, they need to add things. Each ask or request is that they have to add it. Traditionally, and I'm only talking about my experience, we have 1 user, you're going to add other users, the rent has increased with users. So with this, what they're stating is they'll give us $200 if they add any other users. Correct?
Yeah, it just says to receive an additional $200 per month for revenue received from subletting. So to me, that says your revenue share is $200 more because we.
This is a letter, this is not an agreement. I mean, and it's not even, it's from Spectra site. I'm just saying, this is not in the agreement, this is not the company that we're negotiating with now.
Well, understand, we got this from the water company, right? We inherited it. So it's not, this is second generation, and they've been honoring that. So I don't think that there's a intent to deceive the city in this.
Oh, no, but I'm just saying is going forward, I don't, that would be probably up to our attorney, is that?
So that would be in the lease, make sure we'd have that in the lease going forward. I mean, the intent here is to say, council, do you want to renew the lease? Is it option 1, 2, or 3? And then we would go and with Rob, make sure the lease language is correct, and then you would adopt that lease.
So for me, I like option 2. I personally think if they only have 1 user at $925, each user they need to add, they have the 4% escalator, and then each user they add on the cell tower would be an extra $500 a month. I think that gets us to what we're seeing that Crown Castle's doing. So I think we have that's just kind of my feeling on it.
So are you making a motion?
I'll agree with you on correct.
I'm just sharing what my thought is on this.
No, I agree with you.
Me too.
So what are you proposing?
I move that we accept option number 2, that the one-time $75,000 payment on with a monthly rent of $925 with an annual increase of 4% escalator, and that is only for 1 user on the cell tower. For each user that they add, the rent will be at $500 per month with the 4% escalator.
But they already have 3 arrays.
They what?
There's already 3 arrays there.
You told me they didn't renew 2 of them, though.
Correct.
So they have to go renew those 2. Once they do, they got to pay us the extra $19.25. We have one user is $9.25. Second user would be $14.25. Third user would be $19.25.
Plus the 200?
I think that's kind of counted in the revenue share. So that would be my proposal. That's what I'm proposing.
So you're assuming that the 200 a month is inclusive of the 925?
My motion is option number 2, a one-time $75,000 payment. The rent for a 1 user on the cell tower is $9.25 with an annual increase of 4%. If they had a second user on the cell tower, or if they add or currently have a user, it goes up $500 to $14.25 and 4% annual increase. If they have 3 users on the cell tower, it's going to be at $19.25 per month with a 4% escalator. And the current revenue share is not there because we're getting the revenue based on those cell towers with their users.
Okay.
That was what I proposed.
And somebody seconded that?
I agree with most of it. I don't quite understand the revenue sharing. I can see where it goes up with more users, but it seems like in the end it went up $1,000. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, it's $1,000. If they have 3 users on that cell tower, it's $19.25.
But right now they're giving us 200?
They're giving us, well, right now, what are they giving us right now? 7 or 5?
Well, they've offered 200.
They're offering that they'll give us 200 for those extra users. Is that correct? Am I understanding this correctly?
I don't quite understand how that works either.
So currently, their monthly rent is $701.87 for the lease, plus $200 for the revenue share. So we're currently collecting $901.87.
But you're saying, Kurt, if they have all 3 users, you want $1,000.
So that would be, so they're currently they're paying $901.87 for 3.
Okay, go back to your one thing. You said they had 2 that didn't renew.
Correct, but
So if they renew, they owe money. Are they paying us for the renewal? I mean, you understand?
I understand what you're saying, but they're not, whether they renewed or not, they're just, their point in saying that they didn't have renewals because they didn't have a long-term lease longer than 9 years.
But and I understand, but my experience is I think that's a fair, we might still even be short on the lease.
So Kurt, you're not wanting to accept any of these options, you're wanting to negotiate, basically?
No, option number 2, we'll accept option number 2, except with the current revenue share. If they have a second user, it's $500. They have a third user, it's $500. Each extra user is $500 a month.
Okay, so option 2, but with a change.
Yeah, option 2, they pay us the $75,000. For the first user, it's $925 with a 4% increase. The second user is an extra $500 with a 4% increase. The third user is $500 with an extra 4% increase. So if they have 3 users, I'm saying it's $1925. Plus we get the $75,000, plus we get the annual increases, to be very open on cell towers, are usually not 4%. They're usually between 10 to 15%. My studies, that's what I've seen. That's what I've seen in my leases.
So what you're saying is we could take this back and kind of negotiate with them.
That's what I think.
Nathan, do you think they're open to negotiation?
Do we have anybody on Zoom or anybody that wants to participate?
No, the only person is for a different item.
Okay, so I shared the Crown Castle lease with American Tower, and originally they had planned to be part of this meeting tonight, and they're not. So I think that speaks a lot. That's just my opinion.
They're also in New York.
What does that tell us, Nathan?
At least in my opinion, if I'm American Tower and I know that Crown Castle is so much more than me, and if I have room to negotiate, I'm probably saying, okay, I will offer more. That's just me.
So
But I don't know the business, so
Yeah, so you don't know if they're really willing to negotiate.
I haven't had any contact with them since.
Does it hurt to go back and share with what we are proposing back to them? What's our risk?
We don't have any risk. I just think, and I'm going to be honest, I think in 2019, we said we'd get back to them and we never did. So we look kind of foolish, at least in my opinion.
And I think some of that comes because we had an attorney change at the time too. I think it was this time last year. The attorney was supposed to kind of talk with them. We went through an attorney change at this time last year who was
That's
in
part of it.
That was who was in the negotiation with them.
That was part of it, yeah.
So who exactly will do the negotiation? Would it be the city manager, or would it be Tyler?
Whoever the
or
council
Rob?
would like us to do. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I was the one that kind of put a little bit of the kibosh last year because I have some experience. But the council, you have a proposal before. That's my thought and my proposal.
And I don't think it hurts to go back and present this to them and negotiate some. So I'll second Kurt's motion.
Okay, it's been moved, it's been seconded. Any other discussion? So the motion is to take this offer back and negotiate with them. And
About the profit
presume,
sharing, yeah.
Kurt, that,
So is that a yes vote then?
no, we haven't voted yet. We haven't.
If you're in favor of going back and with the terms to them that was proposed, that's what's going to be going back to them.
Okay, because that's not what this says right here.
Ignore the title, yes. So you're voting on Kurt's motion right now.
Okay, great.
And, okay, so we're just going back and negotiating with that as a starting point. Is that correct? Okay. And that passes unanimously. All right, next item. Amendment to the Water Reservation Agreement. Is that Nathan or Todd?
That's me again. Okay, so just for some overview, the county acquired some, the city acquired some water shares with the enclosure of the Murdoch Canal. When the canal was enclosed, there was a calculation done of water savings due to not losing water from evaporation and ground seepage.
And stilling.
And what?
And
spilling.
Yeah, people were taking it, so.
Yeah, stealing, yes.
Stealing.
And so those shares were offered for purchase, and that was one way that they funded the piping of the canal. So the city did purchase those, some of those water shares, and in 2016, the council authorized or directed staff to accept cash in lieu of dedication for these shares. And what that meant was, as many of you know, we require dedication of water shares for culinary and for PI. PI is basically snow water, you can think of it that way. And and this allowed us to try to recoup some of the cost that we incurred, that the city incurred during that time. In 2016, we owed just over $1.9 million for these shares. It had a high debt load associated with them. Since that time, we've collected $475,000, which leaves a remaining debt of about $1.5 million.
Nathan, when you say debt, is this on a bond? Where's that debt at?
No, it's just a purchase, right? We didn't do a bond or anything.
But I mean, is it the correct wording debt? I mean, do we owe someone on this water share?
So we're paying them off over time.
To who?
to either Provo River or Highland Conservation.
So we haven't, okay, so there's an annual payment that goes out, okay.
And additionally, when you have shares, there's an additional payment you make just for having it.
Right.
So just to carry the shares,
Think of it like an interest payment on a car loan.
yes.
And
if
that's
we
been
pay
coming
it
out of the PI fund, right?
Yeah, PI fund.
Yeah.
So
Correct, and
if we
so.
pay it all off, we still have an annual fee that we owe.
Yeah, we have an annual
Yeah,
assessment.
that is the assessment, but this, look at it this way, we are paying for our portion of that enclosure pipe, so.
Yep.
That's essentially what that money was used for, was
Correct.
to build the pipe.
And we're all still paying on that, so.
So, over time, we've done that. Like I said, we've collected about, what did we say, about $475,000. And the city can't sell water rights to people, meaning we don't transfer water rights from the city's name to somebody else's name. What we do is we now assign it to a specific property. And that fulfills their water dedication requirement for that development. So we've been approached by Perry Homes. The property is 59 acres. It's currently in the county. I'll show you a map of them in a minute. It's in our annexation policy plan, meaning it'll be annexed into the city. Annexation into an adjacent city would be difficult, and I'll explain that in a minute. Here's the property before you. It's actually in pink, the property that Perry owns. In between there, between the two properties is private property. If you recall, we refer to as Section 23. This is Section 23. So this purchase of this water would apply to 42 of the 59 acres. And that's how much water this would cover for that dedication requirement in the pink area. The reason we say it would be difficult to be annexed is on the west side. There's another city that approaches it. On the north is Draper. To serve that, they needed another system to serve that property. We have planned for it in our master plan, but you would need a complete infrastructure system to do that. So in 2016, the council approved a reservation agreement that allowed developers to come forward and say, hey, we want to reserve X amount of shares for this development, and but we're not quite ready. Can we reserve this water? And one of the requirements of that is that you had to have final plat approval with that. So Perry Home is requesting that we remove the requirement on that reservation agreement for final plat approval. That would allow them to enter an agreement for reservation for the remaining 126 acre feet that we have for the water. And then they would like to enter into a purchase agreement with the city for that water by the end of November. And that would cover 42 of the 59 acres that they have. And they would have to find water for the remainder.
But Nathan, at this time, this property does not reside within Highland city boundaries.
Correct, it's in the county.
So when we say remove the required final plat approval,
yep,
that's not, they haven't even submitted a plan to us, and they're not even in the city. Now, I understand they're part of an annexation plan, but that can change in the future. They're not even part of the city proper right now.
So we do have an annexation application on the property to the west that it says Croft LLC. We do have an annexation application on that. One of the things that would be addressed is those issues in a purchase agreement with that water. We'd address annexation, what would happen if they didn't annex into the city. We've talked about, well, the city would get that water back at the price that we today.
Why are they not annexing? Why aren't they coming in?
Dan is on the line, he'll talk to you about that in a minute. You can ask him that. So the things to consider, from our perspective, the things to consider is we have 126 acre feet remaining, which covers about 42 acres. This is one of the last remaining large parcels in the city that's planned for development in the city. And the state has, the Boyer project has plenty of water that they don't need it. Patterson does, and when I say Mill Haven, that's Reinhardt. We haven't heard that they need water. We do have a lot of little ones that have expressed interest, but that wouldn't equal the 126, what they need. So this is an opportunity for us to look at it from a standpoint of, hey, it's one of the last chances we may have to address this. So from a financial standpoint, it's worth about $882,000, which would leave the city to cover about 608 versus the over $1 million that we have to cover now. So from our standpoint, from a debt standpoint, it has some merit for discussion from that standpoint.
And this money would go into the PI fund?
Correct.
Right, okay.
It would go to pay for that cost.
By getting rid of those shares, then we no longer have the annual fee for the shares as well.
We wouldn't have the interest cost. We'd still have the assessment cost.
Oh, because it's getting dedicated to us, yes.
Well, yeah,
So when would...
They're buying it from us and then dedicating it to us at the end.
So they're going to lock in the share price right now at $882,000. So you're saying in November, we'll get this at $882,000?
Correct.
So they'll pay at the end of November. That locks in the price. If we decide, let's assume we don't do this, could we sell these shares if we find out all the developers come in and have it? Is this something the city could sell in the future?
So again, we can't transfer ownership to somebody. So we're not selling as in transferring ownership. We are assigning it to that property. And we have limited opportunities to assign it to other properties in the city. We have to use it within our boundaries.
So they're reserving it, basically?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Well, yeah.
You said there's another application, is it G&H or something like that, the other developer that's above Sky Estates? Has he made any inquiries about the water?
So Perry represents all that property in pink. And the annexation we currently have in for that property in pink, which was the GLCC Croft property.
You're saying, hold it, Perry does own that, has all the property in pink? I thought that's a different owner.
It is, but Perry represents all those, and I'll let Dan speak to that, where they're at with that. Do you want to unmute Dan and have him talk?
Dan, can you hear us?
Yes, this is Dan Reed with Perry Homes. Thank you, Dan.
Go ahead, we can hear you.
As Nathan mentioned, we repair and trying to eliminate. So the main intent for purchasing this water is to secure our position for the 23 acres that we purchased a few years back on the east side. And the remaining water would serve, as Nathan mentioned, a portion of the land to the west, the GCII LLC. And quite frankly, we're associated with the land we own, and in various discussions with the city, this was an opportunity that we felt would be mutually beneficial, satisfy our needs, certainly be a financial influx to the city, and so that was the genesis of the discussion. So. If it's helpful to, can you still hear me?
Yes.
Yep.
can see from the map, we also have land to the south areas, which we are currently preparing the preliminary plat application for. So based on the land holdings we have, we are developing in a reasonable manner and time frame, and based on utility infrastructure, where things need to drain to, et cetera, we are gradually getting to these remaining, but we could not develop those now until we develop that land to the south, if that makes sense. So to address Nathan's other point, definitely no intent to annex out or into any other city but Highland. And as Nathan said, he certainly would agree in writing to buyback provisions, whatever would make the city comfortable there to ensure that this water stays in Highland. We'll do annex all of the property.
Any other questions?
So just then, this is a Kurt Osler, just to make sure I understand. I'm still not clear why you can't make the application to come into Highland city boundaries at this time. I was a little confused. I understand you have our parcel to the south of this, but I don't understand why that precludes the application. I'm just trying to understand.
Just from a development standpoint, we are not ready to plant in those areas, we're focused on planting the areas that are next to the path of development. And so, annexing to involve a plan for the other areas, or a more precise plan, it's just not in the path of development yet. So that will be forthcoming.
Yeah, so then I guess I'm kind of confused, because I don't think an annexation means you have to have a development plan. It just means the property resides in Highland city boundaries, and you still could come and present to the council your plan. So I guess I'm just a little confused on that.
Well, part of the annexation, typically the target zone, and whether we just have not contemplated which zone we would propose based on not having planted the area yet.
So let me just ask a question to Councilman Osler. Are you concerned then, if we let them reserve these water shares, that there's a chance that they may annex into the city to the west or north?
I think we're just trying to protect, but it appears that they're amenable, that if that became a situation, that those shares could, we could do something. There was a conversation about maybe those shares, if they don't annex into the city, the whole intent is to do that. So what we're hearing is that that's their intent. But maybe we put in a motion that if they don't annex in, those shares come back to the city at the same terms of the interest rate that we currently have, as we sell it out. So in a sense, it converts to a loan to us. If we're taking the 82, which we appreciate coming in, pays down, but at the time when the issues the city will have is if they don't come in and annex, and they have now leverage upon the city because we don't have 882,000 to come buy them back, we could put it, say, it turns into the note the same as what we paid off to let you take this position in with our water shares. That's just one option. So I agree with your thinking there. Do you want to make a motion? Because it sounds a little bit like an epistle. I know.
Well,
Yeah, I just would most definitely want that in writing, in that agreement.
Here's a thought relative to that risk, is that we hold that money and don't spend it until it's annexed. That's on us, right? Yeah, but we have an interest payment then. We've locked them into a payment. They give us the 882. We still have to pay the interest on that 882, and yet we've let them lock in the water shares. Does that make sense? And so we really don't get a benefit by doing any agreement right now. That's true. Unless we can work something out in an agreement that says if they back out, then we would need to cover the interest.
And the applicant appears, they brought that up, that they were amenable, that if they didn't come in, that they were amenable to us getting the shares back. Did I hear that, understand that correctly?
Correct. So this is a two-step process. The first step is, are you okay with modifying the reservation agreement that allows them to reserve the water, and then we negotiate the purchase contract.
And then we would still need to agree to the purchase contract, whatever that is.
So that makes it simpler.
Yeah,
It's a two-step process.
Yeah.
Just to address a couple of concerns, those are good issues to raise. The city cannot, under the Utah Constitution, ever actually sell its shares to anyone. So any contract that tried to do that would just be illegal. So we have to frame it appropriately and make sure they understand that so that doesn't become an issue down the road. I just checked in with Tyler, and one of the ways we could frame it is, if they pay that to us, we collect the interest on it as just our consideration if it goes back to them eventually. There are ways we can structure an agreement between them if this is what the council wants to do, where we collect the money, we hold on to it, it earns some interest, the city just keeps that if we have to pay it back to them if they don't use the water shares, or some other arrangement, if that makes
Nathan,
sense.
what's the interest rate we're paying on this? Do we know? I mean, is there an interest rate attached to it?
Yes, there is, but I don't remember it off the top of my head. We can have that for you.
No, but I'm worried that here we are paying, let's assume 4%, and we're making 0.5% by leaving it in the fund that the state has. We're upside down 3.5% each year covering that. And I understand we're covering it now, but we're reserving it here. I see a benefit to the city to find the user that will buy the shares. I mean, I see that benefit.
We can have that information for you with the reservation or assignment contract.
Clarify that, maybe give a couple of options of how that could look.
I mean, Rob, is there a way that we could take the cash, and then if they don't annex in, that there's a trigger that the shares go back, but it's an automatic loan in sense to the city, that we start paying this 4% to them, just like we are currently with whatever we have a loan with now?
I don't think the contract would do that. I mean, I wouldn't say we should agree to any kind of contract where we're basically loaning them money for the shares. It would be something, what I would consider would be an agreement that we're fine with you reserving this, you're the last parcel, for whatever reason the council decides this is a good idea, with a trigger within, 6 months, a year, whatever the time frame the council feels is appropriate, to say if you haven't annexed in by then, these shares are no longer reserved for your property. You get paid back the money you paid.
Okay.
Anything we got out of it, just by holding the money, is ours now. We'll use it for our PI system, make our normal payments, whatever. Give them some kind of clock to finish it.
But, I appreciate all the details we're getting into, but I think the motion we're making tonight is just to modify the agreement that would allow this to happen, but we don't need to be in all the specifics right now. Is that what I understand?
Correct. I mean, you probably just want a general motion that says, as a general matter, we're fine with not requiring final plat approval, with the condition that there is some provision for, de-annexation, or it doesn't get annexed in, that the money is returned, and it comes back to the council for the details.
Rob, can I add one thing here? Because we have assigned these shares to developments as they've come in at final plat. And the way we have done it is we have looked at what we owe on those shares until they're paid off. And the developers would actually give us the money that we would pay out. So it's 100% covered. So we as the city are not encumbered at all with what the payment would be. Does that make sense? So whatever the life of that payment is, we've looked at what it's going to cost to the end of that, and that's what they've come in and paid.
So, and maybe, Rob, this would be maybe the better way to look at it. These shares are owned by the city. We are allowing this developer to use this towards a development in Highland to use those shares. If they don't come and develop in Highland and they don't annex into Highland, can they have Highland's water shares in those other cities? So in a sense, we actually kind of control it that way, where they have to come back to the city because they're not being used in the city.
There is no way the city can actually enter into an agreement. Even if we signed a contract that said we're giving you our water shares, it's void from the beginning
We,
because
we,
it's
we need to
unconstitutional.
yeah, we need to remember that this is just an assignment.
Yeah.
We cannot divest ourselves of water.
But this assignment, can they use it in another city, or is it only good for Highland City?
No, those shares will never transfer name. We will always have it under Highland City.
So, to Councilmember Smith's point, the motion can be simple of the council's in favor of allowing this reservation, not requiring final plat, condition on the city coming up with terms regarding annexation and that.
Okay.
So is that?
I'll try to make that motion unless there's further discussion. So I move that the city council modifies the water reservation agreement to allow the reservation of water shares prior to final plat approval, and with a stipulation that the development is annexed into Highland. Is that what you were saying? Okay.
I'll second that.
Motion by Scott, second by Kurt. Any further discussion? Okay, looks like we're ready to vote, Aaron. Okay, that passes unanimously. All right, Mitchell Hollow Baseball Field. Who has that?
Okay. All right, so Kim, you can help me out on this one if you'd like. As many of you know, we have a baseball field at Mitchell Hollow Park. There it is. For those that haven't been out there, it does have a kind of a combination dirt and grass infield. It's currently not being used for competitive play and practices. We do have some warm-ups going on there every once in a while. It's my understanding that its primary use is every once in a while people will have a pickup game, or dad and son will play catch or something like that. Home plate. You can see the two baselines. We received a phone call about trying to improve this area. One of the residents to the west was looking, it said, he'd be willing to mow and things like that so people could use it. Staff is looking at this from a perspective of trying to get the field to be used, and looked at it from a perspective of how our field at Heritage Park functions. Mr. Christofferson is actually a Highland resident. He lives here, and he came with a proposal that, excuse me, that where he would replace the infield with artificial turf. He would maintain that infield. And he's asking for priority use of that field. I know in the report it says up to 50%. We have since communicated, and that would be up to 3 times a week. He would use that field. He is asking that we secure the infield. So, just a minute. Secure the field to prevent damage to the infield. On the city side, we would secure the field. We extend the existing fence, which is about 300 feet of fencing. We'd be responsible for taking reservations. Anybody could use it. It would have to be used. It would have to be used through a reservation system. We would have to work out the details on how that would work to make sure people could access it, whether it's kind of electronic lock like we do at the community center or something like that, without having staff run down there and open it, or in the morning or at night, or things like that, and then charge a fee for use of the field. That is the basic outline of the proposal. One of the benefits for him is a potential tax write-off. He figures the cost of the transition from the current grass and infield to artificial will be run about $80,000 to $100,000. It would need to be completed by end of November. Let me make sure that one's right. The purpose of getting this in front of you today is to get your initial thoughts, concerns, construction done. He's saying by the beginning of November. Don't know if that's possible or not, but get your initial thoughts, and then would have some kind of MOU draft with him on the use and how this would work. We don't currently have one with Lone Peak baseball on the other field, but we would have one with him, so we knew how this would work and maintenance and things would work on this.
So with Lone Peak, we do preferential reservations?
Yeah, so Lone Peak on the Heritage Field, they assisted in converting that infield to all dirt, and then they have priority use on that field, and they run all their games and so forth out of there. He's not asking for that. He's asking to use it 3 times a week.
So the city's part would cost us about how much? Do you have an idea?
City's part, so I just jumped on an online fence calculator, and it was $4,000 to $5,000 for the chain link fence. I don't know if that's accurate or not. I tried to compare it to the salt storage fence, but it was hard because they didn't have a lineal, and they grouped everything that we did.
But he has to have this done by the end of November to get his tax?
Well, that's what he's saying. I don't know how accurate it is.
I would think you'd have to have it done by the end of the year, right? But, I mean, that's still not very much time.
I'm not the tax guy,
I assume that he has someone all set up that could do this.
I would assume so also. I don't know.
Yeah, because the construction right now, there's always big delays.
Yeah.
Okay.
What kind of ongoing maintenance would it need from us?
Ongoing maintenance as far as the infield, he would be responsible for that. We would do mow the outfield like we do now, and that would be it. And of course the park, but the infield he would take care of.
So does Mr. Christofferson represent a league, or what kind of use? Is he bringing in baseball teams to play games, just practice?
Primarily practice. He may play a game on it.
Okay.
But he's very, Todd knows him, but he's very involved with his kids and baseball in general. And so it'd be, for him and his teams to use.
He's coached a team called Clutch Performance for several years. I think the current team that he coaches, they're 11. Okay. And they're a travel league, super league baseball team.
So is that a for-profit league?
No, he just coaches a team that his son is on.
So what's the time commitment we're committing to? Are we saying this is our agreements for life of the field? Is it for 10 years? Is it for 3 years?
That's something we haven't discussed specifically.
I mean, okay.
So then could we rent out the field and make revenue off of it if we have 50% use on that?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Well, could he though? Be aware he could rent the field out 3 times.
He's saying, no, we're in charge. He just wants priority use 3 times a week, and then we're in charge of the rest of it.
Okay, so he gets to, does he book it the 3 times, or does it come through our booking system?
So he'd work with us and say, hey, this is when I want it the 3 times. We say, okay. And then after that, it's open for your team or Kim's team or your family or whoever to reserve that field.
He is just asking that he can book it like any normal resident, but have a priority. And then we just would not charge him for his portions, but the rest could be used for any resident or any person to reserve.
So Kim, you live there. This is your park.
Well, I kind of brought this up because my kids play on that park and on that field. And it's one of the things that has bothered me about Mitchell Hollow Park is there is this great baseball field with an amazing fence, benches, and nobody is ever on it. It's unusable just because it hasn't been maintained. You can't play a baseball game on it. So sometimes when I look at parks in Highland and amenities we have, because of maintenance, they're unusable, and instead of maybe focusing on building more, maybe we can focus on how can we increase our usage and
our maintenance.
And our maintenance, exactly. This is one of those instances where I just want to look out at Mitchell Hollow Park and at that baseball field, and I want to see it used. And so if somebody's willing to come in and pay to allow us to have baseball games on that field again, then I'm for that.
So Todd, you're a baseball player. Is this, I mean, is it really just the infield that needs to be updated for this field to become playable? Is it really just, is that the hindrance at this field?
Yeah, the infield is not, so Josh and I have talked about this field, and it is on our to-do list to completely remove the grass and redo the infield so it is playable. It's just a priority that we just cannot get to. I mean, from a public works standpoint, our biggest concern is just the life of the turf. You know, Mr. Christopherson, it's amazing that he would be willing to do this. It's just a concern of ongoing maintenance when his son is grown and gone, and you know, who is going to maintain it after that? And there is a life to turf. In 10 years from now, when the turf needs to be replaced, is the city going to have the money to replace turf?
Or we could just turn it into dirt, right?
At that point, pull it up and turn it back into a dirt field. So there still are some question marks that we need to answer moving forward. I do have some concerns with completely locking up the field and not, you know, allowing people to use it. But if he's going to make that kind of investment, $80,000 to $100,000, I think that we need to protect that.
So let me ask you, just turning the field into a dirt field, you know, I mean, the infield to dirt, which, you know, I've not ever seen an artificial infield in this type of setting. What type of cost is that to the city to go and do? Is it man time and labor? I mean, is that, or?
To do it the right way, which I believe that Mr. Christopherson will do, knowing him, it is expensive, very expensive. So, I mean, this would be, I'll be honest, I think that we will have teams lining up from all over the county wanting to play on this.
And then we can charge them.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is discussion item only, right? You just want our input?
With that, we need your direction. If this is something you want to do, obviously he has to move quickly.
Right. I support it 100%.
I support it also. I think one caveat we do need to recognize is Mitchell Hollow right now is, I believe, considered an open space park. And so the residents around there, I think there should be a little bit of discussion of whether you should charge them a fee to reserve the baseball field in which they're paying extra for that park.
You know, one concern, we haven't really had any public comment. You know, this also pops up. We have one company making a proposal. You know, I just get nervous, and I'm not saying this might not be our best proposal, the best user, the best one that's going to do it. But you know, we're not voting on it. But I just get nervous. We haven't put this out to the public to see if there's other interested parties on it. I mean, I get nervous. We're also just popped up. First time I heard about it was on Thursday, and here we are on Tuesday trying to make a move towards this without maybe opening it up.
That's the first we heard about it too.
Right. But how many times do we have people come and say, we're going to give you $100,000 and just want to use it 3 times a week? I know your concern.
But the other concern, let's look at this as two things. So Lone Peak Baseball is kind of a local league here that is really for local kids in Lone Peak area. We've given them priority, my understanding, over at the Heritage Park, correct? And do they help with maintenance? Are they helping maintain the infield? They're not helping anything. So now we have a user I'm not familiar with this type. I'm just saying, I'm looking at this, okay, if this was Arsenal soccer, and I'm not saying we're turning this, but they would come in, it'd be a clean plate, they'd put in all soccer fields, they'd maintain them all year round, or at least, they'd keep them mowed, everything, the city really doesn't do anything, and we would have to, they entered into a 10-year agreement, just trying to mirror what they did with Lehigh, and I'm going, okay, is this similar to what's the request here on this? It appears, we hear the number of 100,000. I'm not a baseball person, so I have no idea what the number or anything that way would be. It appears nice. It sounds like they're going to take a commitment to do the infield, that they'll maintain it, where they drag, I guess they have to drag like a little thing around.
You don't drag artificial turf.
So, but don't you have dirt around it that you have to rake and all that?
No, it will be.
All 100% artificial turf?
The entire infield will be artificial turf.
Okay, I
So
guess
his concern, one of the reasons for the secure is his concern is keeping it smooth, because if you remember the old St. Louis Cardinals, right? And the seams and things that can get in it, and then you ruin your infield. That's what his concerns are.
So, and it should be that you, like Kim, I think you told me they have motorized vehicles going on that grass.
Oh, yes.
So I wouldn't want a motorized vehicle on the
Scooters, bikes,
artificial turf, right?
That's why you'd have the fence locked.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. If you read the news lately, so BYU did their entire baseball field, outfield, infield, everything in turf. And UVU did as well. And somebody got out on UVUs and did some donuts and things and completely ruined it. So we would have to keep any motorized vehicles off this turf to keep it nice.
and that's where that securing the field, so the infield's
Yes,
not damaged.
so we would make sure that it was fully fenced and the gate to get in to mow the outfield would be locked. Our concern is they're asking us to actually lock all access. So even walking through the dugout would be locked and secured. So that would be our concern is ultimately you could not use the field unless you came in and got a reservation and got it opened.
Which would assure us revenue, because right now people are using fields that are supposed to be reserved without reserving them, and we're getting no revenue, right?
Right.
And if you go to Las Vegas or St. George, that's how all their fields are. They're always locked. You cannot use a field in St. George without getting it unlocked.
So I would be supportive if we can find a way that we can manageably lock it down. I don't worry about somebody else wanting, to do something similar, because I think that field has been vacant for a long time, and if anybody else had been interested, they would have come to us. I think Kim brings up a super good question about open space, because if it's an open space park, then should Kim's neighborhood have to pay the fee to reserve it, or should any open space neighborhood have to pay the fee to reserve it? Maybe if you live in open space, then it's free.
So if you look at the...
But also, wait, one other thing also, I would be way more likely to join the Highland City baseball team and play the 11-year-olds than I would be to dress up for Halloween.
To Kim and Brittany's point about open space fields and should we be charging people, we have been. So we rent out Town Center, for example. We rent out Wimbledon. Those are both open space parks, and we charge whoever. The only thing, we don't charge what we call unorganized groups. So if, a handful of people want to get together and play pickup and actually reserve the park, we don't charge them. But if you're any sort of organized group, we charge you.
But I would think that would be, Kim, to your point about the charge, that would be a separate issue from the decision we're making now. Something to consider and bring up later. But this decision is, do we want to do this? Yes or no?
And I thought there'd been some discussion in pulling Mitchell Hollow Park into a full city park. Is that true? That's what my understanding was, yeah.
That's true.
That's what we discussed at the work session last week.
Yes.
I'm absolutely for this. I just want to see teams playing on fields. I want to see our parks used. And if we have a baseball field that is not being used whatsoever and somebody wants to help us out by contributing to that and also allowing us to make some revenue off of our parks, I'm all for that.
Kim, share with me how the fencing, in the winter, this is a big kind of ice sledding area, maybe ice blocking during the summer.
Yeah.
Sledding, is the fencing to interfere where kids will hit that, or they can keep all the way away from it?
Yeah, I mean, I've sled that, I've gone down that hill many times. Basically, you usually stop right at the fence when you sled down that hill, but sometimes you do hit the fence as well, and kids
So
are fine.
the fence is already obstructing.
Does
So
the
this
fence
would-
go all the way across, though? I mean, in that one picture.
Where
you
the
showed-
hill is at, yeah,
Okay.
So the fence that we have to extend is basically to the dugout to the outfield.
yeah.
And that, so go to the other side, so we still have to extend that. That's the little area that kids toboggan on and things that way.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. That's what we have to extend.
Is there a fence already that way where you have the red thing?
Yeah, so if you look at these photos, you can see that's where it is.
Like you're gonna go at an angle from that dugout to the outfield, but the hill will go straight down and won't hit that fence.
Kurt, basically, we will fence from each dugout out to the outfield fence. We currently do not have fences on either side, so both of them.
So that's the expense of the city, is to make sure the fencing's done correctly?
Yes, and
I mean, it does sound like it can be kind of a premier baseball area by making it, the AstroTurf or whatever. But they have to vacuum the AstroTurf? I mean, how do we maintain it?
So there are some concerns. I think they're definitely that we can overcome them. Turf, if you drop something in it, metal, it's an issue. Turf can get very hot as well. I've heard stories of, even these football fields that they're putting in, getting so hot that if you walk out there barefoot, it could burn your feet. So there are some concerns there, but ultimately there are things that we could overcome. I talked to Josh about this today. The biggest issue for us is just long-term maintenance and replacement of the turf, because Mr. Christopherson, I don't know if it's his youngest child. I know he's 11. The team that he's currently coaching is 11, and they're a perfect age group for this size of field. As they grow, they're going to outgrow this field. They'd be hitting home runs into the neighboring homes and streets. So a few years from now, they're going to be too big for this field, and what happens with the turf 8-10 years down the road when he's moved on? That's the biggest concern.
An agreement should take care of that.
Yeah,
Right.
So anyway, those are our only concerns as Public Works.
And if you take the turf off, the ground underneath it is that going to be the quality that you would want on your?
No.
So you'd have to do something on top
Yes,
of that.
we'd need to do some reworking of the material below at that point.
Would you be in worse condition in 10 years if you took the turf off than you're in now?
No. No, we just need to remove it, probably take out some material, and then bring in the red clay dirt for a baseball field.
Okay, so about no different than now, and then you have X amount of time of a really nice field that will get used. Are we ready for a motion?
I don't think, it's not a motion, is it?
Actually, this
Is this a motion
This
now?
will need one, won't it, Nathan?
I don't think it's a motion. I thought it was a discussion.
So we can't enter into agreement without a motion to do that. Is that, or do we need, Rob, do we need a motion on this?
I think it's just discussion.
It was left open so that it could, if we needed a motion, we could do it. I believe is how it was written, because it doesn't say discussion item only, or it doesn't say action item. So the question I have, Rob, if we were to try and work something out with Mr. Christopherson, would we need a council agreement to do that?
Yes, but the intent was to bring that back, so.
But bringing that back, our next meeting is November 10th.
Right, so
That's what has to happen. We don't have a contract for the
Right, so.
council to review at this point.
Be-
So the council can kind of do a straw poll of, we'd like to see this, we're in favor of this, here's our concerns, go see what you
Put
can
in
work out.
agreement. I mean, if you're okay with him proceeding, he can proceed at his risk, I guess.
Would it be illegal if we did make a motion?
No.
It's on the agenda for your consideration, so.
We're okay. You need to bring us back a MOU.
That takes care of the longevity, the
Yeah.
issue.
Spells out the exact terms of the priority and all of that.
But the motion could be, we agree with these general terms, we'd like a
Formal memorandum of understanding and addressing.
resolves
Yeah.
Todd's concern about longevity.
Do you guys want to?
Does anybody want to make that?
Todd, you okay with that?
Yeah, I think that we just, if the council is okay with us moving forward, we'll try to put together an agreement and bring it back with what.
And I'd recommend maybe there's a renewal time period in there, so we kind of know we're going for a period, and then it has to be renewed, so there's another commitment to kind of keep maintaining it.
Yeah, I think that, Mr. Christopherson was very clear on what he was proposing for the field itself, but I think that we need to know a few of those things where, what's going to happen down the road, how long does he want to
That would be a good way to
maintain that, keep it going, so. We'll try to cross the Ts and dot the Is and bring back an agreement, but if, Nathan, I think that really what we're looking for is this a positive thing for the residents of Highland as far as the council's concerned?
I would suggest if we do a motion, that gives Mr. Christopherson more comfort than not, because if he's going to proceed or we're going to work on it, that's my opinion. It's not, the council doesn't have to agree or not, but do you have an opinion, Nathan?
If it's me and I'm spending $80,000, yeah, I'd kind of want a nod, official nod.
I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Scott.
I move that the city council approve instructions to the city staff to drop a agreement with Mr. Christopherson to establish a public-private partnership regarding the improvement and maintenance of the Mitchell Hollow baseball field.
I'll second it.
Motion by Scott, second by Tim. Any further discussion?
Is that enough for staff to understand what they need to come back with? And for the attorney?
No.
Nods from both.
Do you okay with him going forward if he has to, with those deadlines he has?
I'm
At his
support that.
risk, sure. Well,
Yes.
Yes.
and we need to vote.
We haven't set up electronic, so it would need to be a voice vote.
Okay, so voice vote. Is this a roll call, Rob, or is this a roll call vote?
Whatever you're right.
Okay, so let's start with Tim. Yes. Kim?
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Scott?
Yes.
Brittany?
Yes.
Okay, next item.
Oh, my bad, sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
On October 6th, the library board presented our annual report for the library, and at that time, we presented our updated version of the strategic plan for your review. And today we're going to talk about what we proposed in the strategic plan. The strategic plan contained goals for programs, the collection, and a capital improvement program. And I'm guessing that the main questions that you might have today have to do with our proposed library program space. So what would a library program space mean? What we really mean is community space that the library could use to do programs. We're thinking of a large event space, smaller meeting rooms, some study rooms, and that might include space for increased library collection, but it doesn't necessarily have to. So why do we need program space, library program space? First of all, Highland Library has the third smallest square footage per capita of any library in Utah. And that doesn't even count the residents of Alpine or Cedar Hills. There are many services that we cannot offer because of space limitations. The problem will only get worse as some of the proposed communities, additional communities are added to our population and the population gets bigger. The city of Highland has no indoor space for a large community gathering, and there are no study rooms and very few small meeting rooms readily available for people in our community. So I wanted to show you some pictures that we kind of have maxed out the space we have. This was a library program with a wild animal program, and you can see we are wall-to-wall people. This was our fairy tale ball last year. We could not have any chairs for that event because if we did, people just wouldn't have fit. This is story time before COVID-19. You can see our little children's room is packed solid body, wall-to-wall bodies. You can't really shake your sillies out safely without hitting somebody. This is our parent-child book club. Also pre-COVID, our numbers are all down because of the virus, but that won't last forever. And we had to set it up right there in our stacks. And if someone had wanted something from those shelves during the program, that would have been difficult. This is my office currently. We lack storage space, and so our early literacy kits are being stored on my office floor. So that current library needs for more space. But there are services that we can't even offer because of lack of space. And what might these be? What kind of services could the library offer if it had more space? Maker spaces. I don't know if you're familiar with makerspace trends, but it's when libraries offer spaces in their building that has special equipment that people can come and use. This one is a 3D printer makerspace that could be used, but there's also makerspaces for audio or visual recording. The Orem Library has a makerspace that has sewing equipment. But we actually were interested in maybe getting a 3D printer, but there's no place for us to put it. Meeting rooms. The library directors I talked to, their meeting rooms are in huge demand. They are used all the time, and currently, because we're using our single meeting room to quarantine books, we don't have any meeting rooms. Larger meeting spaces for the community are also very a very good service to offer a community that we do not offer.
Are you excluding the community center?
We do have some in the community center, but the community center isn't well set up for, say, technology. Like,
No, but when you say we don't have room for meeting, I don't think that's accurate, actually.
That's true. There are some meeting spaces in the community center, but they're not well set up for modern technology.
That's true.
The ability to circulate kind of non-standard items. This is another strong trend in the library world right now. You could circulate a kit that had a nice camera and a book about how to take pictures. Or you could circulate a kit that had a Cricut craft cutter and, you know, a book that has craft ideas of what to do with a Cricut. Or you could circulate something like a virtual reality set and instructions how to do that. And we can't even consider that because there's no place to store those kind of things. This is another strong trend. I would say every new library has a small business resource center where people who have small businesses could come and use a copier, a paper cutter. There's also literature there for them to use. The computer would have access to maybe Photoshop or InDesign that they might not be able to afford as a startup company or as a small company. And so those are available at the library.
So would that be stuff that they would pay a fee for to use?
We could decide. Most libraries don't. And a lot of times the way someone would set up something like this would get a grant to set up a center like that, and then it would just be available for the community.
So there are centers like that under different organizations right now in the state and in other states. So you would be competing with another organization that does similar things.
That's true. And I'll come back to that in a bit. How else could this kind of space be used? My concept is this would not be exclusively used by the library. It could be used for a community events like a musical concert or a theatrical production, either by a local group or a group that might come in. A banquet, either, again, by someone in the city, or it could be rented out to businesses to be used for banquet space for their Christmas party, or even just a large family reunion. A conference or speakers that could come in. And this is one of the strongest ones, senior services. We had the senior dinner that we had last month was so popular. We have an aging community, and currently we offer no services for seniors. So we could have a monthly senior luncheon or game night.
The Arts Council actually has a senior arts class that they do at the community center, and they have about 8 to 10 that do show up. So I mean, it's not probably accurate to say there's nothing going on, but so.
Okay, there's not granted. Okay, we could also have community informational fairs, a health fair or a job fair. Or other community things. This is a craft fair, maybe at Christmas time, or a large yard sale. Or we could have some of our Highland Fling events be held indoors, like an expanded art show or the talent show that we don't have space for now. Or we could bring in some of these, so I don't know if you're aware, but some federal and state organizations have traveling displays, some of them science, some of them history, that we could bring in if we had the space, but right now we don't have any space where we could put it, so that's not even an option for us. So that's what I meant by program space in the strategic plan. And this is actually the next item. So does anyone have any question about library program space?
So is your 5-year strategic plan include the assumption that there will be additional programming space?
So the 5-year strategic plan outlines a timeline where we would start making steps towards possibly doing this project. It would start out with a feasibility study to see if this is something that the community is interested in, if they would support it, if the property that could be available to us would even work for this space, would there be enough room for parking?
And this is more than just library. This is this is community center right now.
Right. My concept would be to include the Arts Council that would also use this space. The Historical Society could use this space.
So you're talking about the 1.66 acres that's just east of the police department?
That's what I'm thinking about, yes.
Okay. As a community center, because I think originally when that property was purchased, they were talking about some sort of civic center, possibly library, all that, and that's what you're talking about, is that 1.66 acres?
That's the space that I'm thinking
Okay.
about. Yes.
I guess it's 1.66. How is it? How much is it, Nathan? It's 1.62 or it's 1.6 something, seems like. Maybe it's 1.3, I don't know.
I'll get the number for you.
Okay.
In that scenario, what happens to this library? Do you move this library and put it in a separate building, and then what happens to this? Or does this stay here and you have another building in addition?
Well, that's one thing that we would have to study with the feasibility study, whether it would be worth, I mean, one option would be to leave the library collection where it is and build a separate building that's the community center that the library just uses. Another option would be to somehow expand some of the library collection in the new building, and that's something that would be decided in the process.
In the feasibility study?
Yeah, in the feasibility study.
Scott, it's 1.68.
Oh, well, I wasn't too far off.
Good memory. Any other questions?
So Donna, I guess that there was and I'd sent an email earlier. I believe that it had come up to the council before about using that property. I'm not quite sure what the final decision and everything was with the council. Why, were they in favor, the past councils, of using that property, or?
Well, when I was on the council before, we talked a lot about being a new library there. But when you go back and look at the original discussions and things, it was a civic center, community center situation for everything.
And I think I would traditionally feel that that would probably be a good use of the space. It's close to the city offices. For me, some of the concerns is going to be the funding. Are we asking, is the government getting bigger? Is this something we're increasing the government size? We're going to have to increase budgets, which then starts to, that's that whole increase is a concern. I think at one time I'd heard that they'd really like to have the library fundraise everything for the capital improvement and kind of stay within the current budget if it's a proposal. I get nervous anytime I hear a feasibility study. Of course, any study that if you're paying for it, it's going to come back in a certain way because you're the buyer. How do we make sure, because our surveys are coming back and showing our residents, and I'm just looking, we represent, our last survey just this last spring says for supporting additional funding for the library, 30% were in favor. As we go through the year before in 2019, 34%, 2018, 37, then 30. I want to make sure that our residents are buying in, and what are we really committing to tax-wise? Are we going to be having tax increases? What's your envision? Is this going to be totally fundraised from the foundation, and the building's going to be built that way? Out of the foundation funds? Is it going to be asking something of the city, or you're going to wait for the feasibility study to come back and say how you're supposed to do it?
Yes, so the feasibility study, okay, let me give you a little background on this. In the original strategic plan that I gave you last month, the idea was that we would create a committee to investigate some of these questions and then maybe do some kind of assessment in the spring of 2021. But I went to a conference on the 8th of October, a directors conference of library directors, and heard about this opportunity for this company, CRSA, that they had some COVID money that they needed to spend, and they would give us a deep discount on a feasibility study. That's why I'm pushing it ahead. I'm like, if we can, do it 6 months earlier and save tens of thousands of dollars, why not do it? As far as how it would be funded in the future, how much it would cost to maintain, those are all questions that need to be investigated. And the feasibility study is how we start to investigate those things.
So the feasibility study includes a resident survey to see what the appetite is for doing that?
Yes, I was communicating with Kathy Whedon, who is the person I've been talking with today, and it would include, like a survey and like a public meeting, open house, or she is willing to work with us and do whatever of those kind of steps that we think are necessary. And that's why in the report, the price range, there was a range, because she's willing to work with us and do the things that we think as a city need to be done to get the information we need to either go forward or not.
So is there a time frame this has to be done by for them?
I think it needs to be initiated before the end of the year.
But not completed necessarily?
Not necessarily completed by the end of the year. It would be hard to do the kind of things they're talking about in the 2 months that we have left in the year.
So that was just going to be, I'm sorry, Kurt, let me finish. An issue of concern is we've had experience with perceived rushing of things like the pickleball, and we got creamed because people perceived that we had already decided to build the courts. And I think there's a danger if we proceed too fast on this and don't frame it correctly, that it would be perceived as, okay, we are going to do this, we're just trying to justify it, instead of we're looking at it to see if it makes sense. And I think taking our time and doing it in steps would facilitate that perception rather than the one where, okay, we've already decided we're going to build something that costs $10 million. So this is what people think, right? That I'm going to build something that costs $10 million and it's going to cost another $500,000 to $1 million a year to operate it. And where's that money going to come from? And of course, people would assume that's taxes. So I would.
But if you're doing a feasibility study, aren't you just looking at that? I mean, we're not committing anything, are we?
No, you're not, but.
And the city's not paying for this, right?
I understand.
Yeah.
I'm sure the perception is going to be, or could be,
So Scott,
like what happened with pickleball, right?
yes.
Well, no, I understand that, but we didn't do a feasibility study for the pickleball,
No, but
which we probably should have done.
No, we should have. The concern is, though, if we're going out for a feasibility study, are we telling the residents that we are amenable to building a new library if it comes back as a yes? Is it, the feasibility goes out, are we sharing, that's a concern of, am I ready to start building a library, community center? No. Am I, I'm not sure our residents are supportive of it right now based off what I've seen in surveys. Are we going out, what's the commitment from the council? I understand someone else is paying, but what does the perceived look out there in the public? Is the public thinking that we are behind this? We're trying to get an approval to start moving the community center and the library forward, and that's why we're doing this study. That's when the thought process is going, is that what we're committing to, is saying, yeah, we want to know what you feel, because if you say yes, we're going to start moving forward, or how do we control that?
That's a really good question, and I know that's a concern. I mean, you don't want to offer something and then pull it back, right? And so one of the things that I'm asking for today is for 2 members of the council to be involved with this on kind of a steering committee. And I would welcome people who are skeptical, because we want both sides of the aisle there. And so that we can proceed appropriately so as to not build up expectations. And so we want someone or two, I kind of want two, one pro and one con, from the council to be part of this so that we can proceed without causing unrealistic expectations, that we can do it delicately in a way where we can actually gather real information, because maybe this is not something that's really been presented to our people before. When people have been asked about, would you want to spend more money on libraries, they're thinking collection space and story times. Most of the people in Highland, that's what they think of when they think of the library. This is totally different from that. This is community space. The library is leading it because we care about it. We need more space for our programs, but it isn't just, it's not a place for more books. It's something different that we haven't brought before the community before, and I think it's worth bringing to the community because we are lacking in a lot of services that other communities offer, and maybe our citizens want them, and we don't know unless we ask, and that's what this is for.
Donna, don't you think our surveys that kind of give us a little bit of a guidance when 30% say they don't want us to increase anything in the library? I mean, to me, I'm just saying as a council person, I think we've kind of, and it's been consistent for 5 years, they're not really interested in spending a lot more money to try to increase the library. At least that's how I've looked at it. Just look at the surveys, and I've talked to people. I mean, there's some that that really love the library, and some say, "Why do we have a library?" And you try to work both ways. Hey, my neighbor, was the library patrons of the year. They're down here, I think, 2 or 3 times a week. I talk to them. They're going to say, "Get built whatever you can." And yet I can go 2 doors down, and that neighbor's going to say, "Oh, here we got government increasing." I'm just saying it's that balancing act of, is this? I agree that I think that 1.4 acres, 1.46 acres. I'd love to at some time see that as a community center. I don't think the city should sell it off to try to get money. I think it needs to be reserved for something for the city to use down the path. I just don't know if it's the time now.
But I guess, Kurt, where I get into issues is I'm not sure if you do a study and just say, hey, we've got this piece of property, we're thinking asking what the citizens want to do with it, basically, and just looking at the interest in that. I don't think it's setting up expectations that we're going to do this.
Mm-hmm. I think also, have their surveys actually asked about a community center or just a library? And we're talking about something bigger than just expanding our library here. We're talking about a community center, and there's so many things that we could do with that. You got the Arts Council, you got the library, you have the symphony, you could even, run rec programs out of there. But mainly, what are we going to do with that space? And if the library is willing to
spearhead this,
to spearhead it and pay for it, then I'm for that.
So again, my personal opinion I don't have a vote, but I think it's good to see what options are out there. I don't think that's bad, because those options could last for years, right? That this is how this could be utilized. As long as it's framed, we're just looking to see what options could exist
for
this piece of property.
And
then they could come back and say, we're not ready for it. Or they could say, we are.
In there, we can stipulate, well, this is what, maybe hopefully one of the things that come out of the feasibility study is what would something like this cost to build and operate, so that we know what that is. And maybe it's big enough that people say, hold, we're not ready yet, but at least we would have done that and known what it is. And then then you identify potential ways to mitigate those.
And you might have people say, this is so cool that we're going to donate a bunch of money towards it. It's hard to know unless you do the feasibility study.
That's the thing. I don't think anyone's offended when you say to them, we're thinking about offering more services to you. Who's going to feel bad about that?
Well, I can tell you that there are.
They'll ask, how are you going to pay for it? That's right. Probably so you want to offer more. How are you paying for it? I don't know.
So Donna, how much normally does this feasibility study cost, and what kind of discount are you getting? Okay,
so the lady said that this kind of a study would cost $30,000 or $40,000. I actually talked to a different library that made an addition to the library similar to this from Duchesne County, and he says that his was actually only about $10,000. So I think she was inflating the cost a little bit, but still $5,000, $3,000 compared to $10,000, that's, you know, a marked savings. Plus, the person I talked to, a different company had done their feasibility study, and it wasn't as in depth as the one that she's talked about.
So, and then the library board, or the foundation pays for this? So
Right,
there's
so
no cost to the city just to ask if there's interest?
Right,
Yeah.
so last week I met with the Library Foundation. They did approve paying for the study.
So how much time do you feel is going to be from staff? I mean, when you say, yeah, we're going to start doing that, there's other costs associated. When you ask for 2 council people, you're taking those 2 council people's time to be on a you know, a board here. But then we also are going to pull your time. We're going to pull other staff's time into that. I mean, it would be because you're getting this discount. So if it was going to cost $30,000, what do we say? Is this going to cost us 5 or the foundation 5? Is that? Or what's the commitment from the city?
That was the upper amount that she mentioned to me was $5,000.
So if it was a $30,000 study, they're going to use 25 of COVID funds, and they're going to have the foundation as offered, which is a very gracious offer, to come up with the $5,000 to be able to cover the other.
Yes.
But then what you see, the time commitment of you, your staff, and maybe Nathan, of other city employees to move forward to get this information.
It will take mostly my time. I don't anticipate using much of my staff time. This kind of steering committee that I'm conceptualizing is some people from the council, the Library Foundation, Shauna from the Arts Council, you know, the Historical Society. That's who I see as the main people in this feasibility study. In honesty, December slows down for me because we're not doing library programs a lot in December. So it's actually a good timing for me to jump into this. And what else is my job for, right? To try to find how we can best serve the people through library services. So I don't see it as a big financial expense as far as staff time.
So this is really kind of a formality for us, right? It's hard to know who's talking, right? This is really kind of a formality for us because the Library Foundation already approved it and it's Library Foundation money.
Right, so we're doing this as a courtesy to you. I imagine we could have just done it without telling you, but that would have been really rude. And we won't go forward with it if you really don't want us to. We respect that we are part of the city and we are under your direction.
So the answer, Donna, you're an employee of the city. So if it starts to take your time, it is something that, you know, I understand the foundation, and I respect the money and the effort that they're putting forth to bring forth. I'm just going, as you're going, hey, you know, we could move forward that direction. That's a little bit offensive to me, and I'm just going to kind of call it out because I'm going, you're a city employee, you're not a foundation employee, you're not the library board employee.
That's true. And
so to start moving forward, and the library to feel, and I understand maybe it was just a comment, so I'll just kind of stop there.
Well, I support it. I don't think it hurts to do a study.
I think there are some potential areas of synergy where you could look, and we've spoken about one of them that still exists actually, that group that's looking at building a theater potentially here under a 501c3.
Oh, you mean the commercial group that approached us?
Alpine Community Theater, yes.
Yeah. So you'd have the Alpine Arts Council that's kind of looked at maybe building, is it something similar?
It's not called the Arts Council, it's called Alpine Community Theater, which is
it's an Alpine, yeah.
It's they're independent of Alpine City.
But they were kind of thinking, have you seen, they were kind of thinking something similar, having.
So there's potential.
Right, and part of the feasibility study would be to investigate possible partnerships with other organizations. So that could be part of the study, is contacting them and saying, you know, how far have you come? Can we make this part of it?
This, personally, I think this is timely because that group is still working towards it. COVID put a dent on their fundraising, but my understanding is they have 1.5 million committed right now.
But I think that'd be great
They
synergy,
need
yeah.
more, and if the library, this is me talking out loud, total speculation, but if the library were to help with that, I think that would allow for some, like, private partner, and it's public and, I don't know what you call a 501c3, it's,
Private
but private,
part,
public partnership, if you will, that, that it becomes shared space, or, just like we just did with this park,
right,
the baseball field, that
we'd look at
preferential treatment on
how to maintain
reservations,
it and stuff.
but those are all
Yeah.
possibilities. So I know that group is still working forward, so if this can wrap around that or be part of it, if we're going to have a survey and there aren't too many questions, I think it would be easier. We might even get more responses if we tailor the library questions in our city survey to this particular question, then that's a combined thing. So I can see some areas where it makes sense to work on this as long as we're collaborative with other things that are out in space right now. So those are my thoughts.
I can support it also, but I would agree with Kurt and Mayor that I would want to be very clear that it is a feasibility study. It's not necessarily implying support for any project at this point.
I'll agree with that also.
Yeah, we
support
would
it.
be very careful, need to be very careful with our wording of things.
So Nathan, this is one that we would want a motion on, is that correct?
Yes, please.
I'll make it. I move that City Council approve the request. Oh, I'm looking at the wrong one. But I move that the City Council approve the Library Foundation's request to do a feasibility study concerning a civic center with library involvement. Does that make sense? I don't know.
Yes.
Community center,
Okay.
yeah, civic center,
And
and contract with CRSA to complete
Yes.
it.
well, okay.
I'll second.
So there's a motion on there to approve the library going forward with this.
Can I ask a quick question?
Sorry.
Would a study include the potential of economic self-sufficiency for the city center in terms of utilizing space to raise money, to offset costs, ongoing costs for the city? Could that include that?
When I was talking to Ms. Wenda Whedon, she was very flexible. So if we wanted that to be a part of it, that could be part of it.
Are you making an amendment? I'd support.
I would like to make an amendment that in the feasibility study, we include the potential for financial self-sufficiency through different methods, so.
I'll second that.
Can I just add a clarifying question, Scott? Did you mention that the funding would be being paid by the Highland Foundation?
Highland City Library Foundation.
So you did make that in your motion?
If you didn't, it is now.
I'd like to amend it, the feasibility.
I talked about the foundation, but I didn't specify the Highland City Library
The
Foundation.
foundation, that's who would pay for this study, so.
Okay, so we had the original motion, an amendment that included that the feasibility study includes self-sufficiency as part of its output, and that it's clear that the library, this feasibility study is from the library foundation. Is that correct?
Yeah.
So, and there was a motion and a second on that. We would need to approve that before voting on the final motion.
Are we doing electronic voting?
So this would be for the to approve the amendments to the motion, then we'll need to do another one for the final motion. So do we want to do the amendments first and then put the final one online?
Do you need to do a vote for every amendment, Rob, or can we just make that a friendly amendment?
So I guess,
Oh,
Vote on the amendment.
so you need to vote on both amendments then?
Yes. One is so the second, the third amendment, if you want to say,
Well,
was,
we're wrapping the second and third
okay.
because we haven't done that yet. Right, so let's vote on the proposed amendments to the original motion.
Can we restate the amendment? It seems like they're multiplying.
So the amendment, so you had your original motion. The
Yeah, I
amendment
remember that one.
included asking that the feasibility study include financial self-sufficiency and how that might be accomplished, what options are available for doing that, and that it clarify that the funding for this comes from the library foundation as opposed to any other foundation. Okay, so that's the motion, that's the amendment that we're voting on, and we'll just do that. Roll call, start with Scott.
Yes.
Kurt?
Yes.
Yes.
Brittany?
Yes.
Kim?
Yes.
Tim? Okay, now we're ready to vote on the final motion, which was approval of the feasibility.
You want me to just restate it? I just move that the City Council approve the commission of a feasibility study by the Highland City Library Foundation, which has already been in the amendment, for new library program space and a possible civic center on the property east of the City Hall, which
And
is
that
1.68 acres.
And then added to that is what we just approved was, and include a
And we approved it.
self-sufficiency component. in
With the approved amendments.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so any other discussion? We're ready to vote. Okay, that passes unanimously.
Mayor, who did the second on that final motion?
The second on the final motion,
I'll second it. Thank you, Kim.
Well, she seconded it the first time, and I just clarified it, so,
but,
yeah.
you know,
Did you?
I'm glad you caught that. I know she thought it, right? Didn't say it. All right, discussion items. Todd, park strips.
Yeah, Mayor, Council, I wanted to quickly just go over something. As you're aware, we have a water advisory board that has been a board that has existed for several years in the city. This board exists to look at water issues and present solutions that the city council can then take a look at and make decisions. A year ago, on Tuesday, July 9th, 2019, we had one of our board meetings. In that board meeting, there was a proposal that came forward. We had a discussion and a proposal, and the board feels like it wasn't properly vetted to the Planning Commission and City Council. And so I am repenting, if you will, and bringing it to the City Council for discussion and to decide whether we move it on to Planning Commission and actually make some changes. But I wanted to read, the discussion basically was trying to conserve water, and the proposal was to eliminate park strips in the city. Not existing park strips, but any proposed development would completely eliminate park strips. Now, there are neighboring cities that only do curb and gutter sidewalk right next to each other. It creates some, issues as far as the utilities is concerned and locations where we can push snow when we snow plow. But here was the motion in our water advisory board meeting. It said, an individual motion to ask the Planning Commission and City Council to modify the city standard and specifications as they pertain to park strips and to allow for the elimination of the park strip. Also, a request is made that the development code be amended to allow for xeriscaping, pavers, and other water-wise applications be allowed in the park strip. So that was the motion. Since then, we have actually looked at our development code and made changes to allow for xeriscaping and water smart applications in the park strips. The reason we did not bring the other portion, completely eliminating the park strips, to the Planning Commission, the City Council. One of the comments that I made in our Water Advisory Board meeting was, we are 90% developed. What this means is that if we were to pass this and we had properties that would come in and develop, because we have small fill-in properties that can develop throughout the city, we would have curb gutter sidewalk, then it would go to park strip, back to curb gutter sidewalk, in several locations. We felt like we as the staff, we listened to the motion and created a change in our development code to allow for xeriscaping and trying to conserve water there. But the board in our most recent meeting, the 1st of October, asked that I vet the first portion of their motion, completely eliminating the park strip in future developments. What that would mean is the last 8 to 10% of our city that develops would be different than the rest of our city. In talking to our public works guys, it does create issues with fire hydrants, with our current locations for water meters, for PI connections. Those types of things would all move from the park strip to behind the sidewalk. We still would have the same width on a right-of-way, meaning that they would still water. It just wouldn't be a park strip. It would be behind the sidewalk. So there are pros and cons to doing this.
So can I ask a couple questions then, Todd?
Sure.
In this case, in cities where they've done that, has the sidewalk been wider then? So instead of 4 feet, it becomes 6 feet, or?
Every city is different.
Okay.
Our current standard is 5-foot sidewalk, and a lot of the cities that have monolithic, is what they call it, monolithic curb gutter and sidewalk together.
Mm-hmm.
It's usually a 5-foot sidewalk. There are some places that have gone to a 6. There are some places where they consider it a trail, and they'll even go to an 8-foot. So is there water savings? Yes. We all know and we all see on a daily basis, people that water the park strip and don't do it properly, they'll spray out into the road and overspray. And so there is definitely some water savings that could happen. How much? I don't know. If we eliminate the park strip completely, what that would mean is they're just watering 4 feet of city-owned property behind the sidewalk in their lawn.
So I'm not sure how that accomplishes much. I really like the xeriscaping, but I think this is an upscale city as it's developed, and I think it's going to look kind of patchy. So you're going to have park strips here and not here. I think it'd be better to have a park strip with the xeriscape. That would look better than nothing there, because you're going to have parts in the city where you've got part of it developed and then the part hasn't been developed. So it's going to be, I just think it's going to be ugly. And I just think xeriscaping is the better way if people don't want to water it.
And the reason I'm bringing this to the council, this means that I would go back and completely change our road cross sections, some of our standard details to show differently, and vet this through Planning Commission, City Council. But I didn't want to go through all of that effort and spend the time and money to do that if the council felt like this was something they wouldn't support. I'm just looking for a level of support. Do we really want to change the standards and specifications for our roadways for 10% of the city?
So Todd, would if the council needed more time for you to share pictures or whatever, and then come back and at the next meeting in a discussion, make their opinions known? It might be a little bit rushed.
I can do that.
So send out something. Is the council amenable to that you have him send more details about what was proposed? Sure. And then think about it between now and the next meeting?
Because I can show pictures of what this means. Maybe it's hard to picture what completely eliminating it means, but I can send out some pictures.
Okay. I just want them to make sure that they get a thorough consideration.
This might give the opportunity for maybe someone on our water advisory board to come as well. So.
Yes, or for in the intervening time for him or her to visit with council members about the issue as well.
We can do that.
And then Aaron, you had something to bring up, right?
I do, and I apologize, this is not on the agenda, so it's definitely not a motion item. It came up, we decided about an hour before the meeting that we felt like we needed a council discussion on this, and because we're not meeting for 3 weeks, we felt like we had to do it tonight. So, so in terms of our rental policy, with the new COVID guidelines from the state, we're wanting some council guidance here because we're getting some pushback. We came up with a plan, but we got some pushback and enough that we felt like we wanted some council input here. I'm going to hand you out some documents. I don't expect you to read all 20 pages, but there's some highlighted sections if you want to refer to that might give you some more information. So within the new state guidelines, there's some somewhat contradictory things, but there's a couple of like key things that have come up that deal with our rental policy essentially. And what we're really talking about at this stage in the game is the community center. We're done with pavilions for the season and we're almost done with fields. So we're really talking about the community center and for rentals. So casual social gatherings. So we are currently in the high risk Utah County. We can move back into lower risk depending on numbers in the future, but right now we're in a high risk. In a high risk, casual social gatherings, such as family dinners, and I'm actually going to quote some of this to you, get-togethers with friends, book clubs, etc., of 10 or fewer are permitted. So 10 people or less for those casual social gatherings. In addition, there's also discussion in, so this is in particular the document that says health guidance levels, 10, 16, 20 at the top. It says that any establishment that allows public gatherings, such as live events, movie theaters, etc., require a completion of an event management template, and then 6-foot physical distancing between household and groups. When we actually contacted the state to get some clarification here, and they said, because you are a business essentially renting out a facility, you fall under that category where we're now an establishment that's renting out a facility. So anybody who rents from us needs to complete an event management template. It looks like this. I handed it out to you. And it goes through, the person organizing the event has to describe what they're doing to essentially meet the COVID guidelines. So thinking about those two things and those two requirements of the state, I'm going to define things a little bit more for you. So, because that's the question that's come up. Well, what's a casual social gathering? What's organizational oversight? So within the first document, it says that casual social gatherings are individuals from separate households, does not involve formal oversight, does not include a gathering that's commercial, educational, political, and then it actually lists out, you know, quinceañeras and baby showers and bridal showers, things like that.
Things that
Versus
people would hold in their homes typically, right?
typically, right? Or, you know, a larger venue if it is a bigger event. Okay, so compare that to organizational oversight, which is so that's not as well defined as social gatherings. So organizational oversight, though, is some sort of management structure with somebody actively overseeing the venue or someone in a position of authority monitoring the event or venue to ensure appropriate COVID prevention measures are in place. So with these guidelines from the state, we feel like they kind of put us in a hard position, and we could really go one of 3 ways in how we want to implement this policy. The first, and I'm going to go and scale from most restrictive to least restrictive. The first would be to only, so in the orange phase, if you remember, council approved, we're only going to do funerals and weddings. This was back in, I don't know, April, May timeframe. Kind of at the very beginning of all of this, we said we would only do funerals and weddings. That's the only thing that we're going to allow. The somewhat less restrictive one that we kind of came up with originally was that We will allow casual social gatherings if it's 10 or fewer people, with the exception if it is a funeral or wedding, we wouldn't restrict you to 10 people. We would allow, if you wanted to hold a larger event, it would have to fall under the organizational oversight definition, and then everyone would have to fill out that event management template, whether or not you're an informal or because you're a formal, because that's what the state told us, is that we need anybody who's renting from us to fill that out. So that's kind of a middle ground. The third, the least restrictive option, that again, we feel like we can justify under the state guidelines, is really to allow any event to take place as long as they fill out this template for us. And we also have a couple of waivers that we have them sign that says they're responsible, it's not the city, kind of a thing. Again, because the state's almost created two classes, right? So you've got this, you know, I'm holding a baby shower kind of a class, right? They're telling you you shouldn't do that. But if they're holding that same baby shower in our facility, they're saying you can if you go through these hoops. So in some ways, Nathan and I have been talking about this, like, is the event that much different to have a Boy Scout pack meeting? We could argue they have organizational oversight because they are the Boy Scouts versus a bridal shower. Is the event that different in terms of the risk exposure? I don't know, maybe, somewhat. But at the same time, part of me feels like while we would be meeting the letter of law, I'm not sure if we'd meet the spirit of the law to go to something as open as everybody can do it, when they're saying you really shouldn't be holding these informal social gatherings. So we're torn. We've gotten pushback from informal type groups who still think that they should be able to be held, have their event. Some, you know, a lot have been understanding, but we have gotten pushback from a few. So we would love some thoughts from you.
Well, and we're starting to hit that time where people want to do piano recitals and company parties and, you know, that kind of.
So I'm just thinking out loud here, but for me, the easiest approach and what makes sense to me is that in this case, we are an event venue and a business, and if the state requires that anyone that rents out a venue fill this out, and I just glanced through it, it's not that hard. And if we wanted to, we could maybe put here's a template, and then here's our recommendations for what you put in these bigger boxes, right? We could make it easier for people by having language that works for different types of events if we wanted to go that route. And then there's no restriction on the type of event that can happen there. I think it's way less restrictive than the orange, yellow, red guidelines from before, because now you're just saying, if you follow this, you can do what you want, right? That's my thought. And it seems like it's easier for staff.
Oh, I mean, it would absolutely be easier. I mean, in reality, we're not going to be strongly monitoring this, right? So somebody can fill out the form and then do something different, you know, because we don't have somebody there to monitor what's going on, kind of a thing. So I agree with you, Mayor. It would absolutely be a lot easier on us, though, as far as rentals.
And I agree with the mayor. You know, it's really interesting because we heard the Alpine School District show that they have very few numbers of kids that have actually come down with COVID. We've got another phenomenon that's going on around the universities because these companies that purchase plasma pay you more money if you've had COVID.
Right.
So we know there are a lot of college kids that know they're not going to be real sick who are actually trying to get it so they can make more money. It's been monetized, which is really sad, but it has been. On the other side, we really need to protect the most vulnerable. I had a lady that came in my urgent care who had COVID. She's 75. She had COVID a month ago and survived it and did fine, stayed home. But now she's full of blood clots, which is one of the big problems post-COVID. So that was someone who should have been protected, but got exposed, had it, survived, but now is, you know, in a life-threatening situation. So it is kind of a hard thing, but I think for the city staff, I think if people understand and try to do their best, if everybody was trying to avoid getting this disease, it would be much better.
Yeah,
Does
absolutely.
that make sense? I don't know. Yeah. But I support the mayor's.
So just, if they fill out the template, they can hold it. And we feel like they're genuine. I think one thing we do have to, we'll have to work with them on is, it still says 6 feet apart, and it's only so big of an area. But
So, yeah, and it's, take a family group, they can, I think the guideline was you keep family groups 6 feet apart.
family groups, yes. Yeah.
And then that becomes a question of what's a family group and.
Anybody who's in a household, they call them household groups.
So if you live together, then.
Yeah. Then you count as a family, or a household group, excuse me.
So Mayor, in your proposal, it's just kind of you're allowing the individuals to determine, does an application, they have to put down how many are going to be there?
Yes.
It's anticipated number of attendees, what's the date?
But
and then
in a sense, they could determine the number of, I mean, I'm just saying, you're keeping it, that they're kind of making some decisions on their own, they're being responsible,
And
they're
we're-
agreeing to abide by certain type of policies.
Allowing them the freedom to be responsible if they want to. And
I agree with the mayor also. I think option number 3 is the best one, and, we need to have a little faith in people that they'll be responsible.
So I'm gonna be the outlier, and everybody's gonna disagree with me, which is fine. So I'm good with that third option, and they fill out the event management template. This is my thing. This is my thing that I think everybody will disagree with. So I really appreciate what staff has done over the last week of encouraging people to wear masks. And I know that a lot of people will say that that means I don't believe in the Constitution and that also I'm a communist. Both of which offend me quite a bit, because I could probably, as much as anybody, tell you exactly what's in the Constitution, like the actual principles. And I have a kid who's sitting in Russia right now, so I really don't like it when people tell me that I'm a communist. But to me, it's a matter of, I'm not wearing a mask because the government is telling me to. I don't need the government to tell me what to do. I'm wearing it because I feel like there is a large segment of the population that makes them feel more comfortable. And so out of respect for that, and because I just want this to be done, so if you want to tie me to a horse and drag me through a bed of nails, if this will be done, even if there's a small chance that will help, then I'm willing to do it. So I'm good with number 3, but I just would like us to, when they fill out the form, I would like it to be a genuine effort to fill out the form. And I mean, I know we can't go around making everybody wear their mask or whatever, but I would like us to at least ask them to make a good effort, and us to continue to provide the example of doing what we can to end this situation. And I'm not a communist. I believe in the Constitution, all the amendments, I mean, we can go over them all if you want to, but anyway, that's my 2 cents, is I would like us to continue taking it seriously and to present a good example that way, because
why are you an outlier?
I want it to be done.
No, I don't think that's inconsistent with.
So Brittany, just to
It's
make
going
sure,
to be done.
is there something when you look at this management template that raises a concern that maybe they're not, or is there encouragement not there to wear a
Well,
mask?
I'm thinking I'm putting words in your mouth, Brittany, but I'm thinking if somebody tells us they're going to have 200 people there for an hour, there's no way you can do that and meet the guidelines in terms of 6 feet apart from household groups. It's just impossible.
So you wouldn't allow it?
So we wouldn't allow it in that case, I feel like, right? Is that, so you want us to work with them on this document to be sure that they really can are genuinely intending to follow the guidelines.
Yeah, and just that they even fill it out, right? That it's not like they're just giving this to you and they haven't even filled it out. Just like a good faith effort that they like actually like understand and are trying to agree with the rules. Like, I mean, I don't want anybody standing at the door checking temperatures, and I don't want you walking around and telling them they have to wear a mask, but just like making sure they understand that we have, I don't know, like, that I want this to be done. Like, I'm over it. Like, I'm done.
So that seems consistent with allow any event as long as the management template is filled out. And you're saying make sure that it's filled out correctly.
Did you put in the minutes that I'm not a communist and I believe in the Constitution? Like, I want that double.
Brittany, what you said doesn't sound like communism to me, but.
Like, literally, I've been called a communist. I've been called Hitler. Like, I've been said I don't, like, believe in the Constitution so many times. And it's really frustrating to me because I feel like
That's unfortunate.
I'm not any
That's
of those
just
things.
unfortunate. I mean, people need to be nice, period, right? Whatever side you're on.
Civil.
So
Yes.
so that's,
Civil.
Aaron, to kind of help
Nice,
you.
don't have, you're right.
Aaron, so
Civil, yeah.
what you were mentioning, what Brittany, I'm just trying to make sure, as they fill this out, what you're saying is if we hear there's going to be a larger gathering than what, I guess, staff feels is appropriate to have at the community center or the space they're renting, then the staff would then raise a concern to Nathan, who will make that decision to say, no, we're not renting.
So right now, it's actually one of our front desk clerks is the one who kind of processes applications for us. That's McCaden. She reports to our treasurer now, Candace Linford. So it would go up the chain of command, right? So if McCaden wanted to reject an application or had concerns about an application, she'd confirm with her supervisor before that would happen, and then if that person disagreed, it would probably come to me and then Nathan, and we would, or Tyler, he's Candace's supervisor, we'd make sure to do it appropriately.
But
think the
can't you
great
invoke
thing-
state rules?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. The great
that's-
thing, they don't have to feel whether it's
Oh.
appropriate or not. They look at the guidelines, look at the application. Does it meet those requirements and guidelines or does it not?
And that's what we've tried to emphasize people. We're not really making new rules. We're just, as a local government entity, we're just trying to apply state rules.
State rules. It's the state.
We have to,
I wish it was that simple.
They like to argue, but that's what we try to say to them.
Right, Brian?
So Nathan, based on what you heard here, are we setting any of the staff up for failure or for conflict? Is this going to be a good enough policy that they can move forward in, what we've discussed here?
Yeah, no, we're okay.
Okay.
This should be less conflict, I think. We picked the,
Yeah, there was one person who had made 4 phone calls today because we were originally telling her, no, you can't have I think it was a bridal shower. So she's going to be very happy.
And I appreciate all that staff has done. Like, I know this has like not been easy for anyone, and I know like it's not fun to wear your mask all day, and I know that it's not fun to, like, it just sucks. So I appreciate everything that you guys have done. It's just not easy. So thank you. Thank you, Nathan. But it's going to be done soon.
yes,
Soon.
soon.
Okay, we'll proceed with number 3 and just have staff work with them to make sure that it's a genuine effort here. Thank you, Mayor and Council.
Anything else anybody wants to talk about? In that case, a motion to adjourn would be apropos.
I move that we adjourn this meeting.
Tim won. Do you want to be the second?
I'll second Tim.
Motion by Tim, second by Kurt to adjourn. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.